going to go ahead and get started here a little bit early. We're about 10 minutes early from our actual start time, but I see there's a lot of viewers already in here. So I guess we won't really start too much until the rest of the people that actually join in at the top of the hour. But yeah, the 9800 X3D, I was reading through the comments a little bit there. The 9800 X3D it's kind of crazy how much the demand has been for that CPU, because I think it was like the way I can sum this up was it was pretty much strike one, strike two, and then home run. It's kind of like that's pretty much what happened. It's pretty much that's how this year's CPU launches have been, because since the Zen 5's initial launch back in the end of July, and then they delayed the Ryzen 9 by like 2 weeks from the initial launch, and then the Ryzen 7 and 5 were delayed by like 1 week, and then the X870 motherboards didn't launch until like 2 months after the initial launch. So, and then AMD benchmarked the Zen 5 CPUs kind of weird, using like admin mode and stuff. And then Intel launched Arrow Lake. We all know how that went down, because we recently covered Intel's Core Ultra series on this channel. And that one was kind of, to put it lightly, it was a little bit underwhelming in certain aspects. And then finally, however, it's almost like there was a whole redemption arc for AMD. Although AMD, to AMD's credit, I still think that the AMD Zen 5 launch, though it was kind of a botched launch, they definitely kind of fumbled it. I still think the Zen 5 CPUs are fine with the Windows updates, with the BIOS updates. I've retested the Zen 5 CPUs. A lot of the reviewers, they retested Zen 5, and it's pretty much fine. You can do things like run 8000 on a high-end motherboard if you want for the DDR5. So it's basically fine. Intel will eventually get there. I feel like Intel, give it a few months of BIOS updates and driver updates, whatever it takes. At some point, the Intel Core series will kind of be okay, but they're definitely not ready for prime time. So we're going to put Intel to the side for now. We're going to shift focus back to AMD with the newly released, yeah, we've got one. To quote The Verge from all those years ago, we've got one. This is it, guys. The AMD Ryzen 7 9800 X3D. So this is the world's fastest gaming CPU on the planet. And let me tell you, the demand for this thing is crazy. Crazy. I gotta tell you guys a story. This morning, it was ridiculous. I woke up to check the listings on Newegg, on Micro Center. Newegg showed that they were there. No, Newegg actually... So Newegg was weird. For those of you that were trying to get it on Newegg, it was bizarre. It was like it popped up, and then it was available, and then it was gone. After like 1 minute of somebody posting it on the AMD subreddit, they were like, hey guys, the Newegg's got it. And then it was like, and the first reply to that post was like, and it's gone. It almost felt like the 2020 trying to buy an RTX 3080 and a PlayStation 5, although it wasn't quite that bad. So thankfully for me, I have the convenience of living near a Micro Center. So, however, the Micro Center was kind of scary too, because Micro Center, I checked the Micro Center website, and it showed 25 plus in stock. So it was like, I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, so they got a whole bunch of them. It's totally fine. I don't have to reserve one. I can just drive to the store and go get one. So I thought, okay, I'll check back in like an hour, because Micro Center doesn't open until like 10 a.m. local time. So even if you check at like 7 a.m. in the morning, 8 a.m. in the morning, you still can't actually buy one, because the store is not open yet. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just go there once the store is open and go and get one. It can't be hard. It looks like they got a whole bunch of them. Then we get to like 9 a.m. and I have the tab open on my browser, so I'm periodically checking the listing on Micro Center. Newegg was already gone. Like, Newegg was like out of stock within the first, I think, 10, 15 minutes. It was completely gone. But Micro Center, it was still available, for me at least. So we come to about 9 a.m. in the morning, and then all of a sudden, it's like the website refreshes, and it went from them saying more than 25 available to sold out of stock or sold out. It's like it instantly went out of stock. And I was like, wait a minute, what? How did it go from like plus 25 available to, and it said limit one per customer, to all of a sudden like sold out? Like, how did it, what? I didn't even get any notice. It was like, it didn't even drop from like 25 to 20 to 15 to 10 to, it didn't even go down that fast. It was like instantly sold out. And I was like, that's impossible. The store isn't even open for a whole nother hour. How did it sell out so fast? And then I started thinking, oh no, did a whole bunch of people just start reserving it for in-person pickup? And I missed my chance because I didn't reserve it, because I just thought, oh, I'll just go over there and get one. So we get to about 10 a.m. The store opens at 10 a.m. I still haven't left to go there yet because I was thinking, oh, it's sold out. I guess I can't get one today. So, but I kept checking the website occasionally. I would refresh the tab. It kept saying sold out, sold out. So 10 o'clock, store opens, still says sold out. So I sent an email to the Micro Center sales team over there. I'm like, hey, your website says that the 9800X3D is out of stock. It showed that it was in stock with a whole bunch of units available. Is it really out of stock, or is it actually like a false listing and you guys actually have a whole ton of them? And before they could reply to my email, I think it was like about 15 to 30 minutes after I had sent that email, I refreshed the website again. And sure enough, all of a sudden, it just showed it was available, and it said more than 25 units available. So I was like, okay, that's it. I'm just going to have to go over there and see what's happening, get to the bottom of this. So I literally just went to the store. I walked in there. There was a whole bunch of people in the store. Like, there was all these people, like, with shopping carts, like old school shopping carts, putting, like, computer cases and motherboards and all this stuff in the carts. And I was like, oh, I bet I know what all these people are doing. I was like, this is Christmas in November. There's literally like all these people on a Thursday morning. Like, this is literally a work day. It's in the middle of the morning, and people are like not even at work. They're just like at Micro Center, like shopping for the CPU. And I was like, what is this? This isn't even Friday. Like, why are all these people here? So I go to the Micro Center people, the sales people, and they're like, so I asked them, I was like, hey, I need to get the 9800X3D. Do you guys still have it? It says you have it on the website, although it didn't say it like an hour ago. And then he's like, yeah, we got a whole bunch of them. And I was like, well, how come the website said that you were sold out for, it was saying it was sold out for like 90 minutes before the store even opened. And then he was like, yeah, we got like an influx of like 200 plus web orders. Like, all of a sudden there was like this mass influx of web orders of like 200 plus orders. So literally within like a 10-minute interval of the listing, they sold like 200 plus 9800X3Ds in like 10 minutes. Like, of like people just ordering it from the store website. Meaning they would have to go and get it, because Micro Center, you have to go and get it in person. They're not going to ship it to you. So you actually have to go there. But they had all these people, all these web orders, like 200 plus web orders. And they were like, so what they did was they kind of like cut off the supply momentarily, because they couldn't tell if they were getting like scalpers or something. Like they were getting attacked by scalpers that were just buying up all the CPUs. So they basically like capped it, and then they put it back up after like an hour or like 2 hours or something. Hey Kay, just subscribe. Thanks for the sub. So I was able to get one from Micro Center, as you guys can see. So I was able to walk in. I bought one very nonchalant. Like a whole bunch of other people were in there buying like a full system. They were buying like bundles with motherboards, and they were getting like DDR5 RAM and like SSDs like this, for example, and like this. People were buying like all these SSDs, and then I was just, man, this is crazy. It feels like I'm in here on like a Black Friday, and it's a Thursday in the middle of early November. Like, what is happening? There was so many people in there. It was crazy. And I can't even imagine the people that were trying to buy this thing online from places like Newegg, and the thing like literally sold out within the first 15 minutes. Jump scare soundboard. Yeah, that's what it was like for me. The jump scare was like when I saw the website refresh and it went from like they got tons of stock to out of stock. Because I was totally not expecting that. I thought I'd be able to just go in there, get one. It's totally fine. Like, no problem, you know? I don't have to worry about it. And then all of a sudden, it's like sold out. All of a sudden, anxiety starts building. And I'm like, oh boy, how am I going to get one of these? I guess I'm not going to get one of these after all. But anyway, they still had it. So, kudos to Micro Center for not pulling a Best Buy. What does Best Buy do? What's the Best Buy thing? Best Buy like releases them in batches, right? Like they put a few up for stock and then people just buy those up, and then it's out of stock, and then they release a few more, and then they're gone, and then they release a few more. I think that's how Best Buy does it. So anyway, we got the 9800X 3D. I will be doing a live PC build featuring this and a new case that I also picked up when I was at Micro Center, because I don't know what it is. It was so addicting. Everybody around me was buying like all of these computer parts, and I was literally there to just buy the CPU and leave. But I saw all these people buying like full systems, and they were doing like PC part picker style builds and using Micro Center's build tool thing on their website to put together a computer. And I was like, man, okay, I gotta get some other stuff while I'm here. Because I'm not going to come back here for a long time, because this completes the cycle of like PC upgrade refresh for this year. So I was like, okay, in that case, what could I actually use as a upgrade? And then I figured, okay, a case, because I'm still using my NZXT Hades from 2009. That case is literally 15 years old, and it's falling apart, and it doesn't have USB 3.0. It doesn't have USB-C, let alone even USB 3 on the front panel. And the 2.0 header on the motherboard or on the case is falling apart. Like one of the wires fell out, so only one of my USB 2 ports actually work. So I was like, man, okay, I need to get a new case because this case is falling apart. So I ended up getting a new case. We're going to build this. We're going to do a PC build probably tomorrow on a live stream featuring the new case that I got, as well as this CPU, obviously, and one of the X870E motherboards. And a lot of the viewers have been requesting that I use the X870E Tai Chi from ASRock, so we're probably going to put this new 9800X3D in the Tai Chi motherboard, and we're going to build it that way, because that's what a lot of people are requesting, and we're probably going to build it with DDR5 8000, so 48 gigabytes of RAM, and either the probably this inland, well, I don't know, I have to get like a Windows, I have to like probably clone one of my SSDs, but I'll probably do that off stream. But we're just going to build it in that new case. I have no idea how to build in that new case, so that build video is probably going to be a longer live stream than the previous build video that I did a while back. But yeah, other than that, the major thing for me today was the PlayStation 5 Pro. As you guys know, today is not only is today, and this thing is heavy. Not only is the Ryzen 7 the today's Ryzen 7 9800X3D launch day. Today is also the launch day of, if you may not know, man, this webcam is small, the PS5 Professional. So yeah, not only do I have the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, my PS5 Pro that I pre-ordered like a while back. This was back in like, I forget when this was. It was like early October or late September or something. I think, yeah, it was back in September. If you guys remember, it was the 30th anniversary edition. Like, people were trying to I myself was trying to pre-order the 30th anniversary edition of the PS5 Pro. And there was a whole bunch of people just scalping that thing like crazy. So it was impossible for me to get. However, I was still able to pre-order this thing. So I managed to get my PS5 Pro today. I'm currently sitting here glancing over at the other monitor, which shows transferring data to another console. I'm currently copying over everything that's on the launch PS5 over to my PS5 Pro. It says it's going to take about 5 hours to do all of that. So yeah, that's just going to go for a while. So expect to see a bunch of PS5 Pro content in the next several live streams here. We're going to be taking a look at PSSR, how the games are improved. It is probably the best way to game on a console right now by far. PSSR and the better, higher resolution and the higher frame rate and all that stuff. So we're going to be streaming Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I need to complete that game, as well as Stellar Blade. I also need to complete that game. And Rise of the Ronin. All three of those games are games that are PS5 exclusive, and I need to complete all three of them. So expect to see a lot of those three games in the next weekend. Probably this weekend we'll be showcasing those. And then, yeah, we'll be doing the live stream build tomorrow evening for the 9800X3D, and we'll probably be doing like some overclocking stuff on there at some point in the future, so stay tuned for that. Unfortunately, the Monster Hunter Wilds beta is over, so as much as I would have loved to showcase the 9800X3D and the PS5 Pro with the Monster Hunter Wilds beta test, we can't do that because that was last week, so now it's kind of whatever. So I guess for this stream, we can go ahead and go through some of these articles here. So the PS5, the Ryzen 7 is available. WCCF Tech did a review of the PS5 Pro, the next gen graphics update. So we're gonna do a lot. There's gonna be a lot of focus on PS5 Pro for this channel for this month. Pretty much for this month. I don't know what we're gonna be doing like next year. We'll be back on track with the technology stuff. But I think right now, the vast majority of the gaming audience is focused on the PS5 Pro. Otherwise, they're focused on the new AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D. So if you're building a PC gaming system, or you're upgrading an old system for whatever reason, the Ryzen 7 9800X3D is probably the go-to choice. Not only is it most likely the best choice for gaming, it is also a very good choice for productivity, considering the fact that most applications these days use the GPU for accelerations. You can actually get this and save money on the CPU side, for example, and spend more money on the GPU. So there's stuff like that. Unfortunately, we're not going to see any of the new GPUs until next year. So the current generation graphics cards are all relatively old now, especially the higher end. All the higher end cards are about 2 years old now. Nathan Wood, thanks for the sub. So PS5 Pro is probably where most of the console, or most of the gaming content on the channel is going to go for this next month, for November at least. CES 2025 is going to be all about a bunch of like APUs and AI and stuff, what I imagine, and probably some GPUs for consumer, since they're running late. They're all delayed by like a whole quarter. Micro Center near you has 9 left in stock. Well, if you're thinking of upgrading, you better jump on that, because those are going to be gone by the weekend. I can already tell. You were the first in line at Micro Center this morning? Yeah, good for you. There was a whole bunch of people. When I showed up around like noon. I was there at like 12 because I didn't even start going there until like 11 something because when the store opened, it said it was out of stock. And I was confused, and then it came back in stock around like 11:15 or something, and then I was like, "Wait a minute. Did their website mess up or what happened? Did they find a whole bunch of these in the back?" So I was like, "I better go over there now, otherwise I'm going to lose my chance at getting one of these things." Because if you miss the first batch, your next opportunity to buy the Ryzen 7 9800 XT is probably going to be the third or fourth week of November. They will probably drop ship a few of these, but realistically, for stuff like this, it's kind of weird. It's when a brand new part comes out, it's usually lower in supply. There's always that initial wave of stock just to prove that they launched it. And then once those are gone, then you have to wait for the second batch. The second batch is probably going to be in like 2 to 3 weeks from now. So if you miss your chance and your only hope is like Newegg because you don't live near a Micro Center, then you're going to be waiting probably until the third week of this month. So you're waiting about like 2 weeks, I would guess. Somewhere around there. So Black Friday, that will be the time to get one. Don't expect there to be any kind of Black Friday sale on this processor. This processor is way too new and it's way too in demand. However, that being said, the 7800X3D will probably drop in price for the holiday season. So if you're okay with buying the previous generation CPU and saving some money, that is an alternative path that you could take. How I would only suggest doing that if you're somebody who is on a what I call a pandemic PC, which means your computer is 4 years old or older. If your computer is 2 to 3 years old, I would suggest not getting the 7800X3D and waiting for the 9800X3D to come back in stock. That way it'll feel like a worthy upgrade. I feel like if someone is on a 2-year-old, 3-year-old computer and they upgrade to a 7800X3D, yes, it will be faster, but it'll feel a little underwhelming because though it is faster, it's like not insanely faster, if that makes sense. So the 9800X3D, if you're on a 2 or 3-year-old computer and you really want to upgrade for the efficiency gains and the better performance, the 9800X3D is really the way to go. If your computer is 4 years old or older and you can't get a 9800X3D due to stock or like scalpers and all that other stuff, then alternatively you could potentially consider the 7800X3D as an alternative. That's the way I would look at it. 7800X3D is either out of stock or overpriced. Yeah, it will go back down in price. Micro Center does have the 7800X3D. When I was there this morning, I looked at what they had. They had a ton of 7800X3Ds. Micro Center is like the mecca of the CP of computer hardware. If you don't live near Micro Center, you are totally missing out, man. Micro Center is like, it's like, it makes you feel like you're a 7-year-old kid in a Toys R Us, if that makes sense. Or it makes you feel like you're a 13-year-old in a GameStop in the early 2000s. That's what it makes you feel like. So Micro Center is like, it's like the candy store or the toy store for a tech enthusiast. So when you're in there, you're just gonna want to like hang out in there, man. It's weird. It's like nobody goes to like a supermarket or a grocery store or a Walmart or something to hang out. But Micro Center is the type of place where you just want to hang out. It's like, it's weird. It's so weird, the feeling of being in that store. Oh, man. So anyway, let's try to run through this a little bit. And then what I want to do here, I guess what we'll do for the majority of the stream, we will go through, we'll do PC Part Picker, and we'll suggest some, I guess, different category price points for those of you that are thinking of doing a build, or you're thinking of upgrading from an old computer to a new computer, or it's your first time building a PC, and maybe you're somebody who was thinking of getting the PS5 Pro, and you're on PS4, or you're on mobile, and you're thinking of playing PC games, or just upgrading to PC in general. And the PC is a good alternative to the PS5, but it is a very expensive investment compared to the PlayStation. See, a lot of people were complaining about the PS5 Pro's price. However, the reality is if you want to get a equivalent gaming experience on the PC, you're going to be spending a lot more on a PC just to get equal performance to a PS5 Pro. So we're going to try to build a decent PC here that is better than the PS5 Pro, but not insanely expensive. I'm going to try to do that. You already have bought the Nova. So if you're playing games at 4K, it's really going to be up to you how you're going to use a computer. The 9800 X3D is still going to be the fastest CPU, even at 4K resolution. And it'll probably age better than the others with newer graphics cards, if that makes sense. However, because of 4K resolution being so GPU bound, the difference between a 9800 X3D and any of the other Ryzen CPUs, particularly the Zen 5 CPU, so those will be the Ryzen 9000 series, you're not going to see that much of a difference. On average, you're going to see anywhere from no difference to like 1% difference between the 9800 X3D and the other CPUs. So just keep that in mind. At 4K, you're always going to be GPU bottlenecked. Also, if you're gaming at 4K, there are only 3 relevant graphics cards at the moment. Number one, the RTX 4090. That's really the only one today that is still what I would consider a true 4K graphics card. But even the 4090 today is starting to show its age because it is over 2 years old now. And, you know, it's, how old is it? It's 49 months old. So it's getting kind of old. Oh, not 48 months, 25 months. It's 25 months old, and it's now to a point where I have seen games dip below 60 frames per second at 4K with the 4090, and that is a GPU bottleneck when that's happening, not a CPU bottleneck. So Monster Hunter Wilds at 4K native resolution with everything cranked out with no frame gen, the RTX 4090 will dip below 60 frames per second. So that being said, there aren't really any major differences in the CPUs if you're gaming at 4K. That being said, the 9800 X3D is still going to be ever so slightly better than the others at 4K, but it's not going to be by a large margin. However, once we get more powerful graphics cards, you will see a wider gap at 4K between the 9800 X3D and the other CPUs. So just keep that in mind. But if you're doing a lot of productivity stuff, you may want to consider the 9950X, because the 9950X is a very good multi-thread CPU that I would consider an appropriate choice for someone building a 4K desktop that can game and also do a lot of other things. So that's the one that I would recommend for productivity, for example. So, but also know that the memory amount is also going to depend on how many cores you have. So let's here, actually, before we dive into this, I kind of wanted to go through the reviews, but I guess we don't need to go through the reviews on any of this stuff. The thing I want to say about this CPU is all the reviews are positive. I have not come across a single negative review of the 9800 X3D. This is the complete opposite of what we witnessed a few weeks ago, last month actually, with Intel's Arrow Lake launch. And then if you go further back with the Zen 5 launch, both of those launches were kind of, I feel like Steve from Gamers Nexus said it best when he said in his review that AMD picked up the ball and fumbled it and lost 5 yards, and then Intel intercepted it and turned around and ran toward their own goalpost. And then finally, AMD threw a Hail Mary and the 9800 X3 caught it, leading to a touchdown or something like that. He ran out of sports acronyms because he didn't know enough about football, but that doesn't really matter. The point is, the way Steve summed up these last 3 CPU launches with sports analogies, American football analogies is what he used, were hilarious because he was like right on with how he described it. Like AMD, it was their turn. They had the ball. They fumbled and lost 5 yards with Zen 5. Then Intel intercepted the ball and literally ran toward their own goalpost. Like they didn't even know what they were doing. And then AMD finally scores a touchdown at the end with the 9800 X3D. But man, it took them a while to get there. This has been a wild last few months for hardware enthusiasts. Let me tell you, that was ridiculous. Like the plays for the past 3 months were insane to watch. Okay, so anyway, if you have the opportunity to get one of these, now you probably want to, because based off of what people are saying, based off of what I've seen at Micro Center, based off of the Newegg selling out literally within the first hour, these could be potentially hard to get. It's all going to depend on supply, and it's also going to depend on the demand, because if the demand stays really, really high, that is going to open the door for scalpers. The more people are looking at this processor and are interested in this part, the more scalpers, it's going to attract scalpers to buy it up in bulk and then just screw everybody over and mess it up just like they did back in 2021 with graphics cards. So yeah, so we definitely don't want to run into that situation. So if you are able to get one of these and you've been waiting all year to do a PC upgrade, you literally have seen everything now. You saw AMD's Zen 5. You saw Intel's Arrow Lake. And now finally the year is at the end and it closes with the 9800 X3E to come back and save everybody like Goku in the Majin Buu saga of Dragon Ball Z. Legit. This is exactly how it played out. It's like Majin Buu saga. Failure, failure, failure to defeat Buu. You had Ultimate Gohan get absorbed. You had Majin Vegeta blow himself up, aka Intel with Atomic Explosion. Team Blue just blew up, and it's like, okay, now you got Goku to show up and just save the world again as a Super Saiyan 3. So that's another analogy. But anyway, that's a Dragon Ball Z analogy. Not everyone's going to understand that one. There's probably more people that understood the football analogy. But anyway, let's move on. So what I want to show here, let's open up Paint. Let's go to Paint here. Okay. So if you're building a PC, you want to build your PC appropriately. What do I mean by that? How much RAM do you need? Let's make this larger. Okay, that's whatever. How much RAM is needed for the Ryzen 7 9800X3D? How about this? What is a good amount? There is a rule of thumb, and a lot of people seem to get confused about this. So if you look up, the best example I can give you is Adobe. Adobe has system specs for Premiere, for Photoshop, for all of their productivity things. Puget also recommends the same thing. So for every core, for each core, physical CPU core, you need 4 gigabytes of RAM. This is a non-standard rule, but most developers who write productivity applications, they go by this. They use this as a rule of thumb. It's more like an unofficial standard recommendation so that you know how much RAM your CPU should have to avoid resource issues with the operating system scheduler and the way the memory controller will manage the memory. Well, it's not really the memory controller, it's really the scheduler. It's really the operating system. So this will apply for any PC that you build. So what does that mean? If we have the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, this implies that we have 8 physical cores. So what does that mean? Therefore, 8 times 4 equals 32 gigabytes. This is why 32 gigabytes is the recommended number for most gaming PCs. This is where they're getting this number. Now, one thing you'll see when you look at like minimum game requirements for a lot of games, notice that the minimum is usually going to say like 16 gigabytes of RAM. 16 gigabytes of RAM. That is actually half. So what they're doing is instead of doing 4 gigabytes per core, they're only doing 2 gigabytes per core, which could work, but I'm just looking at my operating system right now. If I pull up Task Manager, I'm using 18.6 gigabytes of RAM right now. Like on this PC, I'm using 18.1 gigabytes in use right now. So if somebody only has 16 gigabytes of RAM, that is really not enough RAM for a modern computer at the end of 2024. So 32 gigabytes is definitely the recommended number for good reason. Regardless of whether you believe what I'm saying or not, this is the rule of thumb from the software developers. So you go look up Adobe's requirements. This is a standard thing. System integrators. I'll use another example. System integrators who build pre-built PCs like Origin, like CyberPower, like Falcon Northwest, like all those other people, like Puget themselves, they will build computers to the same spec. So they're only going to sell systems that are built on this principle. These underlying principles. They'll never tell you this. This is more like trade secret information that the public is not supposed to be aware of. So, but anyway, you heard it here first. So the rule of thumb is for each physical CPU core, you need 4 gigabytes of RAM. This is the reason why if you do this, you will not run into problems with the game stuttering due to memory management issues or no more physical memory, because when you run out of physical memory, what happens is Windows starts pushing things onto the hard drive, or now it's most likely an SSD, so it's not as bad as it was if you had to use a hard drive, but it has to go to something called a page file. And if you're having to use the page file because you're running out of physical RAM, that is a very bad thing. And then you're going to run into performance issues and stuttering and all kinds of like weird things that manifest as some form of slowdown with the system. So that way you want to avoid that by building a PC that has a proper amount of memory based off of the size of the CPU. So if you have an 8-core CPU, you should have at least 32 gigabytes of RAM. That doesn't mean you can go more. You can definitely go with more RAM. More is not worse. More is better, but more is not always going to translate into some vast improvement in the way the system behaves, if that makes sense. So 32 is the correct number. Yeah, even your old computer from 2000. Yeah, so what I'll tell you guys, so I was on 8 gigabytes of RAM until about 2011. In 2011, I moved to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and then I went to 32 gigabytes of RAM in about 2017 with the Zen 1 launch. So 32 gigabytes of RAM for me is like way back in the day. I have been on 32 gigs since 2017. Then I went to 64 gigabytes of RAM during the Zen 3 era, and actually the Zen 4 era when I went to my first 16-core CPU. Because if you have a 16-core CPU, let's do this math for this one. So Ryzen 9 9950X, this is a 16-core, 32-thread, well, just do 16 cores. It's 16 core. Hence, what does that mean? That means you need 16 times 4 equals 64 gigabytes of RAM. So I have been on 64 gigabytes of RAM since my 7950X from 2 years ago. And then I went to 128 with Threadripper. So it's like you do the math. The other thing too is a lot of people don't realize this, but technically speaking, if we're talking about the Threadripper,
should I also get 8000 RAM to fully utilize the 9800X3D? Currently on 6432 GX2 with the 7950X3D.
That's a good question. So I've said this, I think, in a previous live stream. If you're running 6400 in a 1-to-1 ratio, you don't really need to change anything. If you're unable to run 6400 in a 1-to-1 ratio and you want to do a couple of things. One, you want better performance, and two, you want potentially better idle temperature and idle power consumption, you can go to 8000 megatransfers, because 8000, a lot of people don't know this, and I've said this like pretty much for the entire year. 8000 megatransfer RAM does not require an aggressive VSOC voltage. So the benefit of running your RAM at 8000 is you reduce the stress on your memory controller, therefore you don't need as high of a voltage for your SoC, so you can run that at lower power and you can still maintain 8000 on the RAM speed. So you get the best of both worlds in the sense that you get better memory performance because the memory is running faster, but you also get lower power consumption on the I/O die, which ultimately means that you can transfer that power budget to the cores. Therefore, you could potentially get better overclocking potential with the cores. So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of subtle advancements, advantages, I should say, that you get from running the RAM at that 8000 speed. That being said, you definitely want to consider the motherboard you have. Hey, Chaka, thanks for the sub. Only high-end motherboards can handle 8000 megatransfer RAM. So, and we're going to put the notes for that's going to be on the board here shortly. But in general, if you have a high-end motherboard, you're likely to be able to do 8000 on the memory if you so choose. If you have a lower-end motherboard, you're probably better off with 6000 for the RAM speed and trying to clock the U clock as high as it can go. So that is kind of the rule of thumb. So if you have a high-end board, you have the option for 8000. You don't really need to leverage that unless you really, really want to try for the best performance. And if you have a lower-end motherboard, don't even bother with 8000 because it's not guaranteed to work, because the motherboard is going to be the limiting factor of whether or not you can actually run the RAM at that high speed. So Threadripper 7960X, this is a 24-core processor. So this is 24 core. So what does that mean? 24 cores implies 24 times 4, which means 96 gigabytes. So my Threadripper should have a minimum of 96. My 9950X should have a minimum of 64. And the 9800X3D should have a minimum of 32. This is how you scale the memory, because the amount of RAM should scale with the amount of cores. If you have a big high core count CPU and you combine it with a puny 32 gigabytes of RAM, you're going to run into all kinds of issues with the scheduler and memory management problems, assuming you're actually doing something with the computer that actually leverages the horsepower that the CPU offers. If you're literally just doing nothing with the computer, or you're like doing some lightly threaded task or whatever, then the RAM is not really going to matter that much. But as soon as you start doing something that actually uses the cores, you don't want to pair a 24-core, 48-thread behemoth with some puny little 32 gigs of RAM. So the CPU determines how much RAM you should have at minimum. And remember, guys, these are minimum numbers. That doesn't mean that if I'm building a 9800X3D, that doesn't mean that I can't pair it up with 64 gigs of RAM. Or 96. You know, but if I have a Threadripper, I do not want to pair it up with 32. I don't want to pair it up with 64. It starts. The starting point is 96. So it's one of those things where the more higher end you go, the more expensive it gets. So notice, because think about it, 96 gigs of RAM is going to cost a lot more than 32 gigs of RAM. Likewise, a Threadripper is going to cost a lot more than a 9800X3D. So the amount of money to spend on a true high-end desktop, it scales a lot if you want to build a balanced system. The more you buy, the more you save. Well, it depends on how you're saving, though, because the idea behind the more you buy, the more you save is the more you buy, you spend more in CapEx up front so that you can somehow improve your profitability in some form. Now, in the case of people just gaming, people just want to build a gaming PC, there's no such thing as the more you buy, the more you save, because you're not making, unless you're making money gaming, like you're actually a pro gamer or something, you're not going to see any return on that. Unless you're talking about the value, like the tangible value of just leisure time and the enjoyment you get out of gaming, maybe that pays for itself in some philosophical way. But we're not going to go into that. That's like way on a whole different train of thought here. But the point is, the amount of RAM is dependent on how many cores you have. So if you want a balanced system, you should ideally aim for this rule when you're speccing out your build to come across a good minimum number. Okay, so that's the RAM. Now let's talk about let's leave that one up here. We'll delete those two. Now for the speed. So memory speed. So the question earlier was about DDR 8000. So DDR5 6000, DDR5 8000. So we talked about this, I think, on the weekend. We'll talk about it again. Or maybe this was last week, actually. So DDR6, the limiting factor is the memory controller. The memory controller, meaning the U clock. This is the limiting factor. This will determine whether or not you can actually do this. With DDR5 8000, the limiting factor is the motherboard. The motherboard. And the memory. And the RAM. That's the limiting factor when it comes to running fast RAM. So these are kind of the rule of thumb. So if you have a lower end motherboard, let's say you're somebody who has a B650 motherboard. This is going to be for B650. B650, B650E, X870, and maybe X670. These. DDR5 8000 is most likely going to be reserved for those who have X670E an X870E. Meaning, I would not advise... So if someone is considering DDR5 8000 just because they want to see if they can do it or not, I do not recommend... If you've got any of these, I do not recommend this at all. If you've got one of the following that I've circled here, you're better off with sticking to the tried and true DDR5 6000. Because the trace layout quality on these is a lot more variable than what you're going to find on the higher end boards. So higher end, they have a choice. Higher end, they can either do this or they can either do this. It's up to them. They decide. Now, some X670E boards are not as high-end, and this is also true of X670E. Some of them are not as high-end as others. There is a tier list. There's a performance factor in terms of the quality of the motherboard. Some X670E cannot do 8000, or it's not guaranteed to do 8000. Same thing with X870E. So you're going to want to check the memory QVL list to see if it can actually do 8000. So yeah, so my understanding is I remember you have the Meg Ace from MSI. That is an X670E. It is possible that you can probably do 8000. One of my longtime viewers, I can tell you, he also has a Meg Ace, and he is able to run his RAM at 8000 on his Ace. Totally fine. 48 gigabytes. So, yeah, definitely it's an option for you if you want to try it. But here's the reason why the limiting factor comes into play. So, if we're talking DDR5 6000, uClock equals 3000. Let's go with F-clock first. F-clock equals 2000. F-clock we're always going to say is 2000. That's the fabric. Then we're going to say uClock equals 3000. M-clock equals 3000. Because DDR5 equals 2 times M-clock equals 6000. That is how you do the math. It's all math. So this is known as auto. And these two together, when equal to each other, are known as 1 to 1. Therefore, synchronization has occurred. The memory controller, aka the unified memory controller clock, also known as the U clock, is running at 3 gigahertz or 3000 megahertz. And when it's running at this speed, it is equal to the memory clock or the M clock. This is going to be half of your rated DDR5 speed. So the way you determine the DDR5 speed is you take the memory clock and you multiply it by 2, because DD means double data. So DDR, double data rate, means this times 2 means I've doubled it to 6000. And that is where the number comes into play. This is known as auto 1-1, where this is F clock, this is U clock, this is M clock. So how do we make this like look like it's, there we go. There. There. Okay. So now that we've established the DDR5 6000 situation, now let's talk about the DDR5 8000 scenario. So in this scenario, F clock equals 2000. It still equals 2000. But here, U clock equals what? M clock equals what? the DDR5 speed would equal 2 times M clock, what we know is supposed to be 8,000. So you guys need to do the math and figure out, well, okay, I want to see, so now, what I'll say here is, this is supposed to be, we'll say that now we have a 1 to 2, and this is technically supposed to, I'll just say this is 1. We'll give people the answer. So what does this mean? If that is still F clock, the second number in the ratio is the U clock, and the third one is M clock. So can people figure out what these numbers are? Let's see if people in the chat have actually been paying attention. So what is U clock supposed to be when DDR5 is 8,000? And then also, what is the M clock supposed to be? Okay, so people are figuring out, or they have watched my previous videos, because this is like the 17th time I've actually drawn this. So the answer is 2,000 and 4,000. So now, what can we say about this? What is different between these two scenarios? Notice that in both scenarios, F clock is still the same 2 gigahertz. Notice that it's the same. In the first scenario, in the case of 6,000, the memory controller and the RAM run at 3 gigahertz. Therefore, they are synchronized. That is known as that 1-to-1. When this is the case, you get a benefit of lower latency between the memory controller and the memory themselves, the actual DRAM chips. But you have a mismatch between the fabric and the memory controller. So you get a latency penalty here. When the data has to go between the fabric and the memory controller, there is actually an additional latency penalty that happens because the fabric is running at a slower speed than the memory controller. So it's like, even though the memory controller is going really, really fast, the delay incurred here requires something called data buffering. So you get buffering time between the fabric and the memory controller, because the data flow goes fabric to memory controller to memory, back to fabric, or back to memory controller, back to fabric, like that. So the data flow between the fabric and the memory controller has to require buffering. So keep that in mind. Now, in the case of DDR5 8000, now what happens? Now, the fabric and the memory controller are running at the same speed. So now they are synchronized 1-to-1. And the memory is running at double the speed. It is twice the speed. So it's running very, very fast. It's at 4 gigahertz. It is an entire gigahertz faster than when it was at 3 gigahertz in DDR5 6000. So now the RAM is going real fast. And we all know that in the memory... Man, we got a lot of people subbing right now. Vegeta GT just subscribed? Vegeta GT. All the Dragon Ball Z characters are tuning in. Alright, so now we got GT characters here too now? Alright, so the CPU to the RAM. The CPU to the RAM. Think of this as the RAM chips. This is the DDR5. This is... Why did I put a B? DDR5. So you got memory chips. So you have to talk to the RAM chips. this, we'll say that this is U clock. This is M clock. So now, the reality is, okay, I'll tell you guys, the biggest bottleneck in the memory system, forget about all this stuff. Ignore all of this for a second. Pretend none of this stuff is here. Just in general, when we're talking about the bottleneck on a memory subsystem, the time it takes for the data request, let's say we're doing a read operation. We want to read something from the memory. So let's say I'm playing Monster Hunter Wilds and I want to change from the heavy bow gun to the light bow gun. So in the equipment, you gotta go through the menu, you gotta select the light bowgun, you gotta select the one you want. So let's say the light bowgun data is residing in this first chip. It's right here. So the memory controller needs to request to the RAM to go and say, hey, we need to equip the light bowgun or the longsword or the greatsword, whatever, doesn't matter. So, the time it takes for the request from the U clock to the M clock is actually very short. It's very fast. So that request time is not that long. So in the grand scheme of things, even if you run your U clock at a very high speed, that's just how quick it's like, hey, that's how fast it's like it asks for something and then it responds to the CPU cores with something. See? So that's what the U-clock does. But the PlayStation 5 just rebooted. Did it finish transferring all the games? Anyway. Yeah, the PlayStation 5 came back up. This is actually the original one. So the PS5 Pro is actually not in this room right now. So I guess it actually finished copying everything over, but we'll see. I'll check that out later. Anyway, so on the CPU, you have the I/O die, and then you have the CCD. So in the case of a 9800 X3D, you have your cores with the 3D cache right here, but then you have the I/O die over here. The I/O die has the fabric, which is known as the F clock, running at 2 gigahertz, but then it also has the memory controller, the U clock, running at up to 3 gigahertz if you're running your RAM at 6000, which means the I/O die, which is not supposed to run insanely fast because it doesn't use that much power. The fact that you can actually run 3 gigahertz on a memory controller is wild. It is Monster Hunter wild. The fact that you can actually do that. So it's not really going to be the bottleneck. The bottleneck is actually going to be the DRAM chip itself. It's going to be the amount of time it takes the actual memory to go and look in all the different array, table, and address values, having to do a table lookup to find where is that light bowgun. I had it literally a few nanoseconds ago. I put it inside a memory address. I forgot where it was. Hold up. Let me think. The time it takes to retrieve the light bowgun within the actual memory chip, that is the longest time, the highest latency in the entire pipeline. So therefore, the memory itself is the inherent bottleneck in the memory system. Not the memory controller, not the fabric, not the cores, nothing to do with the CPU, and everything to do with the RAM itself. Therefore, the faster you can run the memory clock, the M clock, the more the better the performance will be if you can run the RAM at very high speed. That is the reason why DDR5 8000 is actually objectively better than DDR5 6000. So even though we're running the memory controller a whole 1 gigahertz slower than what it was running at 6000, the memory is a whole 1 gigahertz faster. Therefore, we have reduced the turnaround time for the memory to respond by making the memory clock as fast as we can, in this case at 4 gigahertz. Therefore, you get slightly better performance. So that is the explanation I have on why DDR5 8000, if you have the option to do 8000, you can go ahead and do 8000. I myself have been using 8000 literally all year long and getting the best performance. So the other benefit too is you reduce the latency between the fabric and the memory controller because they're running at a synchronized 1-to-1 ratio. They're both running at 2 gigahertz. So what that means is that when they need to talk to each other, they're communicating at the same speed. So think of it like if you've got two people having a conversation, one person is talking at, maybe, I don't know, like 100 words a minute, and the other one's talking at 200 words per minute. But the one that's talking at 100 words per minute is never going to speed up. He's going to continue to talk at 100 words per minute while she's talking at 200 words per minute. So it's like you got one talking like twice as fast as the other one. That's what happens when you have this scenario where the fabric is at 2 gigahertz and the memory control is at 3 gigahertz. It's fine, it will work, but you're going to get buffering between the fabric and the memory controller. So that is the reason why if you ever look at the block diagram for a Ryzen CPU, and let's see if I can actually find one. Ryzen, let me see, Ryzen 7000 block diagram. Let's see if I can actually find one. There we go. This is a good picture. Let's just go to this. This is kind of blurry, but it gets the illustration across. So here we have, here's the cores. This first block is the fabric. So F clock is right here. F clock is the domain between the CCD cores and the I/O die. This is running at 2 gigahertz. Now over here you have the U clock, the memory controller, running at, let's say we're at 6000. So this guy's running at 3 gigahertz, this guy's running at 2 gigahertz. Now because the speeds are mismatched, this little thing here in the middle, you'll notice there's this little square in here. Let me zoom in a little bit more. It's still going to look kind of blurry. This thing, this square little block that no one ever talks about except me on this one small YouTube channel, this tiny little thing in the middle of the I/O die is called a synchronization device. What this does is this will buffer and help. Okay, I guess let's use a car analogy. For those of you that understand cars, if you understand how a rear-wheel drive transmission works, or just in general how a rear-wheel drive car works, the rear axle has a device between the two wheels called a differential. The differential allows the two wheels on the back of the vehicle to move at individual RPMs that are different. this synchronization thing, this little square in the middle, think of this thing as the differential in a car. You have the F clock being one wheel, and you have the U clock being another wheel. But one of the wheels can spin faster than the other. For example, if you're doing a turn, if you're doing a left or right turn, the wheel on the outside of the turn needs to spin at a higher RPM than the inner wheel. So you can think of it like the outside wheel is the U clock, and the fabric is the inner wheel. So you have to have the differential.
Just found out there is number 32 by 28000 for AMD Expo. Would 48 gigabytes be enough if I mainly do gaming?
Well, I didn't know there was a 2x32 8000 kit, so I would really like to know what memory kit that is, because I've been waiting for that for a while, to be honest. But I still think that single rank is probably going to be the best choice. And I don't know if that 64 gigabyte kit is a single rank kit. So it remains to be seen if dual rank can actually do 8000 reliably. But yeah, if that kit exists, and if it's single rank, then yeah, it'll most likely work fine. If it's dual rank, that'll be interesting, because dual rank is harder for the CPU. And we already, when you're running RAM at 8000, your motherboard is already a huge limiting factor. So if you're running dual rank, now you're introducing the complexity on the CPU side as well. So just keep that in mind. But that's a great comment, because I've never heard or seen a 2x32 gigabyte Expo kit that can do 8000. In fact, I haven't even seen an XMP kit that does that speed at that high capacity. So that is very interesting. So, I guess the point is, the reason why this is here, this little block in the middle, that is if you're running your RAM at... That's if you're running the memory controller, or not the memory controller, that's if you're running the U clock, the memory controller, at a different speed from the fabric. If the two of them are the same, this little guy in the middle doesn't need anything, he doesn't need to do anything, because the two of them are running the same speed. So think of it like this. If my memory controller on the right side and my fabric on the left side are both running at 2 gigahertz, that, to use the car analogy, that is as if the two rear wheels are spinning at the exact same speed. They have the same RPM, which means they are synchronized together. And if we're talking about the CPU, it means that every clock cycle, the data flows transparently across the fabric to the memory controller and vice versa in the exact same clock cycle. Therefore, you are getting lower latency, because this synchronization component isn't having to do anything, or it's not having to do anywhere near as much work as it has to do when you're running the U clock at 3 gigahertz and the fabric is still at 2 gigahertz. So that's another reason why 8000 in a lot of ways is superior. In subtle ways, it's superior. You'll also, when this thing's not having to do anything, the power consumption is lower. Also, when your memory controller is running at 2 gigahertz instead of 3 gigahertz, you don't need as high of an aggressive VSOC, meaning the I/O die is going to consume less power. This is especially true when the PC is idling, so your idle power consumption is lower when you're running your RAM at 8000 versus when you're running your RAM at 6000 or 6200 or 6400, etc. So just something to keep in mind. Okay. So anyway, I guess let me clean some of this up. Well, it's gonna get rid of my diagram over there, but it's whatever. So there you have it. That is the difference between DDR5 6000 and 8000. If you want to do DDR5 8000, you need to have a high-end motherboard, because the motherboard is the limiting factor. And then if you're doing like dual rank, then no one that I know of, including myself, have been able to test that. So that memory kit that was mentioned earlier, that 2x32 8000, I really would like to know is that G-Skill? Is that G-Skill? Is that Team Group? Who made that RAM kit? Because I am very, very interested in that RAM kit. The question about do you use one stick? No, just put both of them in. He said there was no 2x32. The super chat earlier said that there was. Oh no! Oh, he said there was none. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Okay, thanks for correcting me. Eventually there will be. Eventually there will be, because you guys have to remember there are potentially today there are server memory that does, like, I think, 128 or 96 on one stick? Because how else are these servers running like 2 terabytes of RAM? You know what I'm saying? So at a certain point in time, we are going to get more density on a single rank. So at some point, there will be a 32 gigabyte stick of memory that is considered single rank. And those are most likely going to be the ones that can clock to 8,000. Today, those don't exist, but at a certain point in time, they will show up. That's why when I first read the comment, I was like, oh wait, so they're already coming out? Because I think those things are like roadmap. But anyway, eventually that type of RAM will exist. It just doesn't exist today. Red Bean Soupy. Thanks for the sub. MSI Meg Godlike. Okay, so what are we talking about? Which RAM? Again, like I said, it's one or the other. Either this or either that. It's going to depend on the motherboard. If you're going with a cheap motherboard, you're going 6,000. If you're going with a high-end motherboard, you got some choices. You can do either one. It's up to you. If you're going higher capacity, you're gonna go with this. If you're gonna go 48 gigabytes, as high as you can go DDR5 8000. Provided you have a high-end motherboard. That is my recommendation. I see a lot of comments, people ask me what motherboard to buy, Literally, the answers are on the board. The answers are already on the board. How do you know if it's dual rank? The amount. So today, we're going to break down the memory amounts. Single rank. Single rank means 2x8, 2x16, or, 2x16, 2x24. These are the single rank. Those are single rank. Now, dual rank. 2x32, which means 64. 2x48, which means 96. These are the single rank. These are the dual rank. It is easier for a CPU to handle single rank. Dual rank is harder for the CPU, however, for the memory controller specifically. However, dual rank has the advantage of better interleaving of data. So if you guys remember when we were talking about the bottleneck, you have the CPU and you have the RAM stick, and the bottleneck is not going from here to here. The bottleneck is actually within the memory itself. Dual rank actually performs better than single rank because of the interleaving of data within the ranks. So if you're talking about how do I reduce that bottleneck in the memory, one of the simplest ways is to go with dual rank. However, that doesn't really translate into high speeds because dual rank typically will run at like 6400 max for dual rank. I don't know of any dual rank DIMMs that go beyond 6400 mega transfers. Like, that's kind of the upper limit. Meanwhile, single rank, you're seeing RAM that can go up to like 8400 mega transfers, or now with the coup DIMMs, they're going like 86, potentially even 9000. So that is one thing. Now, coup DIMM will probably increase the speed on dual rank, but we're not going to see any of that for the next like 6 to 8 months. So I wouldn't expect to see any of that stuff on the market. So realistically, if we're talking like Ryzen, the ideal speed for single rank is 8000. And the ideal speed for dual rank is 6000. I don't know why it keeps doing a double S. There we go. So that's kind of the ideal speeds. Also, it's worth mentioning, if you're someone who really, really likes the look of 4 sticks of memory, with these newer X870E motherboards, and even with some high-end X670E motherboards, it is possible to run 4 sticks of memory for single rank. Now, it is also possible to do 4 sticks with dual rank. However, if you guys have seen my memory videos, dual rank 4 sticks is very, very hard. Very hard. So, I mean, and this is true for not only AMD, this is even more true for Intel, actually. It's like even more true for Intel. Because with AMD, there's a good chance you can tune the on-die bus termination values in the signaling to get it to actually work if you understand what you're doing and you're okay with spending like 2 to 4 hours tuning memory and sitting there and waiting for memory training to complete on a 192 gigabyte RAM subsystem. So otherwise, if you really want like 4 sticks of RAM, the best setup that I can suggest is 4 sticks of this type for a total of 96. When I did my X870E Crosshair Hero build, that's exactly what I did. I put 4, so what I wanted 4 sticks of RAM because I like the way it looks. So I did 4x 24 gigabytes equals 96 gigabytes, and I ran that at 6000. This works with a good motherboard. Just saying. So I actually ran the Crosshair Hero like this for pretty much an entire month, until I started building the Intel system. Then I was like, okay, we gotta start messing with the RAM again because I have to build this other computer. So I can't just keep all 4 sticks in one computer. I gotta take 2 of them out and put them in another computer. But that works. So if you really like 4 sticks, this is possible. And it's mostly plug and play. What's not plug and play is like 192 gigabytes or 128 gigabytes at 6000 without like manual tuning. And that's a lot of manual tuning. Yeah, you don't want to run mismatched speeds. Guys, if you're going to do this, you need to buy 2 of the exact same memory kit. Do not mix and match memory kits. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. Oh, and forget about 8000. You're not going to be doing 4 sticks at 8000. So, okay. So now, okay, that actually, well, that brings us to the next point. Highest speed for 4 DIMMs, let's say 4 single rank DIMMs. Highest speed, 6,000. Highest speed for two single rank DIMMs, 8,000. There isn't much of a reason to go beyond that. So these are kind of like, this is all based off of my own testing, my own personal testing over the last 2 years of working with DDR5. Because I have been using DDR5 and I have studied it extensively for 2 years straight. So I'm telling you guys, based off of my own experience, literally hundreds of hours testing memory over the last 2 years, I am telling you right now, if you want 4 sticks of memory, do single rank and aim for 6,000. If you want to see 4, if you're going for like a stylish build and you want all 4 memory sticks populated, that is the limit. That is what you need to aim for. 96 gigabytes of RAM, 6,000, single rank. There you go. Corsair have dummy sticks too? Yeah, but that, I don't know, man. That's lame. That's lame. I mean, you can do that if you want. First of all, I don't have any Corsair RAM that has RGB, so like Corsair dummy sticks with like G-Skill is gonna look really weird. But it is something, yeah. It's worth mentioning that. It is worth mentioning that. But yeah, for a stylish, and you want to prove that you can do all 4 sticks running, you can do 6,000 single rank. I did it like that. I know it works. If you really want to run a ton of memory, you can. Just make sure, just don't expect it to be going very fast. The last thing, what else do I want to say about memory? Oh, what about 4 sticks dual rank? I know someone's gonna ask. I get this comment in my videos, on my memory videos, all the time. Someone's always asking, what about 128 gigs of RAM? What about 192 gigabytes of RAM? Okay, so highest speed for 4 dual rank DIMMs. Expect this to be 5200. I'm just saying, like 48, it depends on the motherboard, 40 and the CPU. 48 to 5200 mega transfers is kind of the upper limit without going insane crazy on tuning the proc ODT values. With manual tuning, it's possible to do 56 and possibly 6,000. But let me tell you, this is not easy. This is not for amateurs. We're talking, first of all, we're talking 128 gigabyte or 192 gigabytes of DDR5. This is obviously going to be 4 sticks of memory. This is maxing it out. This is going all out. Dual rank. All 4 sticks. Max capacity. The highest possible speed with not really doing anything except just like setting it and letting it do its thing. It's going to be in this range. 4800 to 5200. This is true for both Zen 4 and Zen 5. However, with manual tuning of the ODT values, these are not voltages. Voltages are not going to help. It's going to be ODT. It's going to be resistance values, impedance values. You need to change the bus signaling strength by adjusting the impedance. It is possible. I have videos on showing how to do this. This is very advanced stuff, though. This is not for somebody who doesn't want to be digging like 5 layers deep in the BIOS to find these hidden settings. But it is possible. Let me say that again. It is possible to run 192 gigabytes of RAM at 6,000. It is not easy to do. It requires a lot of trial and error, and it requires a lot of manual changes in the BIOS one by one, and lots of hours stability testing the system using things like Y-Cruncher, Memtest86, Memtest64, whatever. Forspoken. All that stuff. That is the limit. This is the utmost limit of what you can expect with manual tuning and that much memory. So if you want to see this, go check out the video on the channel about it, because it's a video that came out in January of this year. So it's not new, but it is not something that everybody can achieve. It's very challenging to do this. Let me say this. This is more challenging than like running 2 sticks at 8,000 on a high-end motherboard. This plus like this is easy. It's easy. This with this is hard. That's hard. So if you think this is easy, this is hard, don't even try this, because this is like extremely hard by comparison. So just trying to gauge the audience's skill level here when it comes to building PCs and tuning them, because these are more advanced topics talking about memory overclocking. Memory overclocking is definitely more stringent, and you definitely want to be more aware of testing for stability when you're overclocking RAM, because if you do not have stable memory, you risk data loss. I want to stress this point because a lot of people that are new to building computers don't understand this. If you run your RAM at an unstable speed and you do not stress test for errors, you could potentially corrupt your Windows operating system or Linux. You could corrupt your Windows installation, which means you cannot get back into Windows without reinstalling Windows. Or worse, you corrupt your save files for your games. So let's say, for example, I'll give you guys a really good example. Let's say you're 300 hours into Baldur's Gate 3. And you're running your RAM at 8,000. You assume it's stable, but you didn't fully test the stability. It just so happens it's not stable. So your computer crashes. Or your computer seems to work, but every now and then something seems strange about it. Like it's a little bit slow. In reality, the computer was running errors in the memory. And one of the things that could happen is data corruption. So let's say you have Baldur's Gate 3, you have a 320 plus hour save file, you're in Act 3, and Henry just subscribed, thanks for the sub. Let's say this happens. The game crashes due to memory being corrupted, or memory corrupting the data. Then you exit the game. You have corrupted the save file on your local computer. So now, if you try to boot up the game, the local save file on the computer is corrupted. So you basically lost all 320 hours of progress, and you have to start all over again with a new game. But you have Steam Cloud saves. So you sync the save in Steam. However, in the case of when you exit the game and the memory corrupted the save file, now when you sync the save file to Steam, you basically overwrite your good save file in the cloud with a corrupted save file due to the memory instability. So now you have ruined your entire 320 plus hour save file for Baldur's Gate 3. And you lost all of the progress, and there is no way to recover it because the RAM corrupted it on the local SSD, and now when you synced the save file into the cloud, you have now corrupted the file in the cloud. Therefore, you have lost all your progress in Baldur's Gate 3. That is one example of how having an unstable memory overclock can be a very bad thing. So this is something that if you're going to attempt this, you definitely want to make 100% sure that it is stable before you start using the computer for everyday things. Because you could, like, the worst thing that could happen is you lose, like, your personal data. Like, whatever you have on the computer, your game saves, whatever, you know, your files, whatever. If you use your computer for work, you lose your work files. It all gets corrupted. So you do not want that to happen. And that can only happen if the memory is unstable. If the CPU is unstable, so let's say we're overclocking the CPU. If you overclock the CPU and it crashes, it's not going to ruin your data because it doesn't have the ability to directly impact the memory or the data the way the memory does. Because the memory literally determines the zeros and ones that it's writing into the non-volatile storage when you're moving something from the RAM into the actual SSD for permanent storage. So you definitely don't want that to be unstable. So this is something that is like, it's like, oh, cool, we can do 8,000, but you just better make sure that it's stable before you actually start using it. So I myself have found that the motherboards, the more expensive the motherboard, the better it is at being reliably capable of running 8,000. The lower end the motherboard, so if the motherboard is like $200, $250, it depends. Some of them can do DDR5 8000, but not all of them. So you're definitely going to want to go with a higher end board if you want to do this. And that is the reason why I'm only recommending the higher end chipsets for anyone that's thinking of doing DDR5 8000. For everybody else with these motherboards, I recommend DDR5 6000. That doesn't mean that you can't do this. It's just going to come down to whether or not any of these motherboards, any given motherboard is actually like good enough in terms of quality of the wire traces and the signaling and the board layers, etc. Whether or not they can actually handle DDR5 8000. What are we saying? Timing is off sync? What are we talking about? Timing is out of sync. 10-layer PCB. 10-layer PCB is like the godlike, though. The timing is dependent on how the memory is running. The timing is about how certain things respond in things like refresh cycles or clock cycles. That's all that it is. Alright, so the last thing we'll discuss is, I guess, overclocking on the CPU side. So we're going to delete all of this. Let me see. I guess we'll try. I guess what I'll do is I'll leave the RAM stuff. We'll remove this stuff. I guess this is enough space. Okay, this is, well, okay. CPU overclocking. CPU overclocking. Okay, we'll just actually say Ryzen specifically because you can't do some of these things. You can't do a lot of this stuff on Intel. You can do some of this on Intel, though. Okay. So, Ryzen CPU overclocking, there are a few methods. There is one method, which nobody really should be using. It's called OC mode, or also known as manual, well, I guess I'll put this one. Manual overclocking. And nobody should be using this unless you're an extreme overclocker and you're going for a world record and you have an LN2 pot or a chiller, at minimum a chiller, or dry ice. Unless you have those things and you have no idea what I'm talking about, do not use this. This is known as OC mode. OC mode, basically, if you turn on overclocking mode in the BIOS, you lose all of the boost algorithms, you lose all of the power saving capabilities. The CPU will only run at a fixed frequency on every single core all the time at a fixed voltage all the time. So nobody should be doing this. No one who wants to overclock for a 24/7 daily driver overclock, no one should be using OC mode. This is reserved for people who are doing extreme cooling and they're trying to do world records at Computex events in the summer in Taiwan. No one else, everyday normal people and the gamers should not use this. Okay, the second method is going to be PBO or Precision Boost Overdrive. This is the method. The second method is the one that pretty much everyone's going to use. And if you look up like how to overclock an AMD CPU, all the videos are going to talk about this. No one is going to talk about this. So the easiest thing to do is to either turn this on or you can do some manual settings. So in here, there's a few settings. So there's something called, how do I want to list these? There's the Fmax Boost Override. There is something called, you may have heard of this, Curve Optimizer. And there's a new feature for those of you who have a Ryzen 9000 series CPU called Curve Shaper. And this one is actually really good. So Fmax Boost Override, Curve Optimizer, Curve Shaper. These are the three main tools within the Precision Boost Overdrive toolkit that can be used to get better performance. The other, the other thing is the third method, which can actually be combined with the first two methods, is called BCLK, also known as base clock overclocking. That is the third method that we'll talk about. We're not going to talk about this. We already talked about it, and no one should be using it. So this one, I think I've already talked about this in a previous video. Basically, the options are you can either use PBO to potentially undervolt the CPU to get better margin, better boost durations out of the margin of the silicon. The other thing that you can potentially use it to do is overvolt the CPU for better sustained and more reliably sustained boost, although they'll be very short intervals. Fiximus just subscribed to the channel. Thanks for the sub. 10x scaler plus 200 clock. That's what this is. This is known as 10x. This is the scalar. Scalar. And what do they call override? Well, whatever. That's the scalar control. Scalar control. That's what this thing is. So Curve Optimizer, I think most people here know how that works. You can either do per CCD if you have a Ryzen 9 CPU, or you can do all core, or you can do per core. You can basically set a negative offset or a positive offset. So on the frequency curve, it looks something like this. If we have a given CPU that looks kind of like that, well, here, let's just do something like this. Let's say this is a standard stock CPU. This is a 9800X3D. So this is the voltage. This is the frequency. For any given value of voltage, it maps to a specific frequency value. Let's say this is 5 gigahertz. And this is, oh, I don't know. Let's just use an arbitrary value. 1 volt. Just to make things simple. I don't know if that's correct, but we're just going to use these numbers. So you have 5 gigahertz and 1 volt. You need 1 volt to do 5 gigahertz. And then this is like an all-core thread. Now the voltage frequency curve does change depending on what core you're examining, and the average aggregate curve is going to be like kind of like a summation curve of all the individual curves. So for simplicity, we're just assuming that this is either visualized as either all the cores averaged or an individual curve. So if you want to go faster, like let's say here, let's say this is 6 gigahertz out here. So this is 6 gigahertz. So if you want to do 6 gigahertz, I'm going to have to draw this a little bit like, whoops, I'm going to have to do, I don't know, we'll just do this. Whatever. So this means now if I want to do 6 gigahertz, oh look, it's going to have to go even higher. Oh wow. That means we're going to need a lot of voltage. It means we need higher voltage to achieve this higher frequency. Now, if we use something called curve optimizer and we apply a negative offset means now, let's say we do, oh, I don't know, negative 20 or negative 15. Now everything gets moved. Let's use a different color for this. Now everything is moved down here. So that means now it's more like this. So now look, with the negative, let's say yellow means negative 20. CO. Or I guess curve optimizer equals negative 20. Magnitude is negative 20. That means that we have now shifted the entire curve down because we made it negative, meaning lower the voltage. But it's still going to try to hit these frequencies, like 5 gigahertz, for example. So now the voltage needed for 6 gigahertz, or let's just use the example of 5 gigahertz. Now, the voltage needed for 5 gigahertz is less. Now it might be 0.8 volts, for example. So what does that mean? That means less voltage, less power, less heat. And that means that the boost can potentially last longer because it's running colder and it's not using as much power. However, the limiting factor is going to be, can the CPU actually sustain 5 gigahertz or 5.5 gigahertz or whatever the number is at that lower voltage? If it cannot, then you're either going to see it not boost as much, or if it's too low of a curve optimizer, it could be unstable and it could crash. So that is how curve optimizer works. I think most people on the channel understand how this works. If we do a positive, let's say we do CO equals plus 10. So now if I do plus 10, I'm actually increasing the voltage. So now it's going to be something like this. So now notice something here. Now, the amount of voltage needed to hit 6 gigahertz is almost like an impossible number. If we were to draw this out, it might be something like that. It's like off the chart, which means the voltage is too high. This would be like, 1.5 volts or 1.6 volts, something that's way too high that you would damage the CPU. It would never even do it. It would never even boost, because I think there's a max voltage limit. There's a Vmax of like 1.4 volts on these CPUs. So it wouldn't be able to do that. So doing a positive curve optimizer is not going to help with the boost algorithm, because you can see it's actually going to require more voltage for a given frequency, which means it's going to heat up faster. It's going to hit the power limit faster, and as a result, it's not going to boost as frequently or in as long durations. So that is the reason why anytime you hear people talk about curve optimizer, they're always referencing negative offset values rather than positive offset values. However, you can actually benefit from positive values, and in fact, you actually need more voltage if you actually want to hit higher speeds. But it has to be realistic. So the idea behind Curve Shaper is that instead of applying this global offset to the entire curve, what if we just wanted to tune certain parts of the curve so that we could get better performance in specific workloads? So for example, if I want better gaming performance, I want the frequencies in this range to run as long as possible at those given clocks. If I want better multi-thread performance, I want the clock speeds here to run at the highest speed possible at given speed or given durations. So you can use Curve Shaper to tune the CPU to improve different parts of the performance aspects of it, if that makes sense. So it's something you have to play around with to understand how the CPU works. We're not going to go too much further into that. Essentially, what Curve Shaper can do is it can create things like, oh, I want negative 20 for my multi-thread. So it might do something like this, but I want higher voltage for my gaming so that it can actually do the higher frequency, and then I may want negative for the max frequency. So you can create something like that. So now we're getting the same lower voltage, the undervolt effect for the gaming frequencies. And we're also getting the undervolt effect for the multi-thread frequency range. No, it's the medium frequency range. But you may need to also put a positive offset for the low frequency, which I haven't even shown here, so that it maintains higher voltage at the low frequency so that it's not crashing because of the negative offset. See, so it's one of those things where it's a very good tool to get different parts of the performance curve. Like if you want better multi-thread, you can do that. If you want better gaming performance, you can do that. So that's what Curve Shaper does. It's really one of those things where it's going to come down to every individual CPU, and all of them are different. All of them have a different stock voltage frequency curve, so you're going to have to play around with what works. If you want to see a more in-depth explanation from me on this topic, I have an entire video showing how to overclock this. It shows like BIOS settings and things like that for the X870E. I believe it's X870E, or actually no, it might be X670E. Now that I think about it, but anyway, there's a video on the channel. Scatterbencher is also a really good resource too. He goes even more in depth than I do on this subject. But I think a lot of people that don't fully understand this material, they'll just watch an overclocking video and they'll try to copy the settings, and then they don't actually understand that their CPU is different from the one that's shown in the video. So they need to really understand what they're doing before they go and do something like this. So, I mean, the worst thing that it can do is it can crash due to instability, due to either too little voltage. Usually it's somebody putting an overly aggressive curve optimizer. And that's the reason why Curve Shaper is actually very, very nice, because it fixes the limitations that came with Curve Optimizer. So personally, I don't use Curve Optimizer anymore. I only use Curve Shaper with PBO. Like, that's literally all I do. And then if I really want to get the best single thread performance, I add the third method, which is known as base clock overclocking. This is a method that can be used to improve performance across the board, but really where it helps the most is with single thread performance, because when you're doing multi-thread workloads and you're fully loading the cores, the boost algorithm will still determine what the limiting behavior or how the CPU behaves when it's under full load. The precision boost overdrive and the general boost algorithm in the CPU will determine how the CPU behaves at full load. Whereas base clock, yes, it does influence that, but again, like I said, you're going to hit a power limit, you're going to hit a thermal limit, you're going to hit some sort of wall before the base clock becomes a problem for multi-thread. So base clock can really help with single thread performance, because you'll see the benefit of this at the lightly threaded applications and potentially even the gaming applications, because those tend to be more slightly less threaded than something like Cinebench, but there's still, depending on the game, a lot of modern games are a lot more CPU threaded than you think. The difference between Curve Optimizer is Curve Optimizer applies a global curve. Curve Shaper will tune different parts of the curve, different zones of the curve. Whether we're talking low frequency zone, medium frequency zone, high frequency zone, and the max frequency zones. And then there's also minimum. And it also applies based off of certain temperature targets, like 50 degrees Celsius, 0 degrees Celsius, and 80 degrees Celsius. So like I said, go check out the video that I did on Curve Shaper. I'm not going to go into that. That's a whole nother hour in itself. That is a very, very in-depth topic. But real quick here, base clock can be used to improve the single thread performance, but this is going to depend on whether or not the motherboard features something called asynchronous mode, also known as dual external clock generators, so that you can basically create two different clock domains, one for your CPU cores and the other for the SoC and everything that's attached to it. And that's pretty much it. Those are the overclocking topics. So that covers CPU overclocking, and we also did already memory overclocking. You only use the PC to watch this stream, but you're still going to. Yeah, and the funny thing is, the reality is, you can do all these things even with AM4. Now, you cannot do Curve Shaper with AM4. You have to be on AM5 for that one. You also have to be on a 9000 series CPU to gain access to Curve Shaper. There was talk of at some point they may add, they might backport the functionality to the Zen 4 CPUs, which is the 7000 series, but I don't know when that's going to show up. So currently, if you want Curve Shaper, this is going to be another differentiating, I guess, a selling point for those that are on the fence on whether or not they should get the new 9800X3D, or if they're okay with buying like last gen 7800X3D, because this has full access to Curve Shaper, and we will be looking at it in future content. So I am going to be overclocking the 9800X3D to get the maximum amount of gaming performance possible out of this CPU, and we're going to also try to improve other areas of it, like the multi-thread performance as well. Okay, let's go back here to what we were talking about earlier. So not this. Let's look at, well, I guess that sums up that. Gamers rejoice, the world's fastest gaming CPU is now officially available in the form of AMD's Ryzen 7 9800X3D. So yeah, if you can't get it on Amazon, if you can't get it on Newegg, although I would not go with Amazon. Amazon's never my first choice. They're always like the last choice when it comes to these sort of things. You're definitely better off with Newegg if you can get it off a Newegg, but I think it's already sold out. Otherwise, Micro Center, if you live near a Micro Center, if you're in the European Union, I know that there are stores that are similar to Micro Center in certain countries. Like, I think Germany has access to Mind Factory, if I'm not mistaken. I forget what the other one is over there. And I think Overclockers UK, isn't that another big store in the UK that would have these? I would imagine. So, for everybody else that's in North America and missed the drop on Newegg, and you don't live near a Micro Center, that's a big feels bad because you're going to be waiting probably 2 weeks to get the second wave of these. But I want to say one thing. Zen 5, so the 9700X and the 9950X and the 9600X and the 9900X, these CPUs are the most fun I have had overclocking a CPU in literally probably almost 10 years. It's been like 7-8 years since I've had fun overclocking a CPU. The last several generations of CPUs, overclocking has been very boring. It has been very stale. Because of Curve Shaper, and because of external E-clock, or base clock overclocking, and the efficiency of Zen 5, the fact that I can overclock on an air cooler and I don't need a high-end liquid cooler, it is so much fun to overclock the Zen 5 CPUs. That is the main reason why I had to have the 9800 X3D. When I heard that overclocking on the 9800 X3D is fully unlocked for the first time ever, there are no longer any limitations on overclocking an X3D CPU. I was like, you know what? I had so much fun with the non-X3D Zen 5. I gotta get me one of these because, like I said, the last time I enjoyed overclocking before the Ryzen 9000, it was on the Intel 4000. The Intel Haswell i7-4770K was the last CPU that was actually fun to overclock. In recent years, all the CPUs from both AMD and Intel have been very boring when it comes to overclocking because you either have to have, first of all, you have to have insane liquid cooling. Second of all, you have to have, like, well, you're not truly overclocking because you're doing, like, undervolts and things like that, which I think is kind of a joke when it comes to overclocking. That, to me, that doesn't feel like true overclocking. Whereas with Zen 5, because these things are not running at the max power limit, you can see how much margin you can get at the stock power limit. Then if you want to raise power, you can to improve stability, like if you're doing curve optimizer with positive offsets, for example. But that coupled with base clock, we're like upping the single thread performance and getting insane Cinebench scores on the multi-thread. We're talking like 45,000 or more, in some cases 46,000 on a 9950X with just basic overclocking on a air cooler. That is insane. So that is why I had to have one of these, because as much as I like overclocking Zen 5, now that I can overclock Zen 5 with X3D, which means better gaming performance, and then the fact that you can overclock, it also means even better gaming performance. Although, so far from what I've seen online, the margins for gaming improvements is very minuscule. We're talking like 2% with the overclock. But we'll see. It's going to come down to Silicon Lottery, so you never know. That's one of the fun things about getting a new CPU as a hobby. Like, it's one of those things, you always wonder if you won the lottery and you got the golden chip. So far, what I can tell you, my 9700X was an average overclocker. The 9950X has a very good CCD on mine. One of the CCDs can overclock very high. We're talking like 6 gigahertz. but I have to disable the other CCD, so it's kind of impractical. But yeah, that one was fun to mess around with. But now I'm going to be messing around with overclocking an X3D variant of this architecture. And yeah, I want to test like AVX 512 benchmarks and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be fun. Yeah, 9800 X3D is... You asked your daughter for her savings money to get a 90... That sounds so wrong. Wow. Oh man, that's like, oh wow, that sounds Micro Center 7600 X3D is $300. Yeah, I mean, if you're someone who just wants a gaming PC, that's going to be a good choice. The 9800 X3D is just going to be so much more fun. I feel like for enthusiasts, this is the CPU for enthusiasts, guys. Because as good as the 7800 and the 7600 X3D are, those CPUs, they're good for gaming, but they're kind of boring. You know, let's be honest. Like, you can't do a lot with them. They don't have access to Curve Shaper. You can't overvolt them. You know, they respond, they're very sensitive to increases in voltage and heat. So it's like you don't even really, there's really no point in overclocking those CPUs. And they're always limited to like 5 gigahertz. So it's kind of boring from an enthusiast standpoint. Meanwhile, 9800 X3D, like, all the safeties have been removed. This thing can go all out, you know? Like, this thing can just go Super Saiyan 3. So, I mean, I don't know, man. The enthusiasts, this is such a great day for enthusiasts because as underwhelming as all the other CPUs that launched this year were, you know, first we had, well, if we go way back to the beginning of the year, we had it was actually a pretty decent CPU, the 8700G from AMD, the monolithic laptop CPU adapted to a socketable LGA 1718 CPU desktop part. That was an interesting one because that one had a newer I/O die, so that one potentially had a better memory controller than the current chiplet one for Zen 4 and Zen 5 CPUs. So that one was a pretty interesting part. That came out back in January of this year. And then the 8700G also featured an AI processor. That CPU has an NPU, a neural processing unit. So the 8700G is actually a pretty interesting chip that was often overlooked because everybody was waiting for the X3D and all the gaming-centric stuff and the high core count stuff like the Ryzen 9. So fast forward to July of this year, and then August, we saw the launch of the long-awaited Zen 5 with the 9000 series. And they were actually not that bad. I reviewed them. I reviewed both the 9700X, the 9950X. I literally have both of them. Well, I've got the boxes literally right here. You guys can see we have the 9700X and the 9950X. We're actually streaming on the 9950X right now. So these CPUs were good, but they were kind of boring for most people because they were expecting better uplift versus the previous generation, hence the meme Zen 5%. But the new architecture is pretty good. Then we had Intel. Everyone was like, oh, well, maybe Intel will do something crazy. Well, Intel did something crazy with their new Intel Core Ultra 200. So this is the Intel Core Ultra 2 LGA 1851. We've done some content on this on the channel recently. It was the last CPU to come out until today with the 9800X3D. It was kind of interesting. It was, in some ways, it was more interesting than the Ryzen 9000 series because this was Intel's first chiplet-based CPU. But boy, is the latency on this horrendous compared to Intel's previous generation, which is the reason why Intel's previous generation performs basically the same as this in productivity and even better than this in gaming. So hence the meme Intel negative 2.85% or whatever. So So I guess at that point, everyone was kind of depressed in the PC gamers space until today, until the Redemption CPU. AMD redeemed themselves today with the 9800X3D. There is not a single negative review. This is winning Editor's Choice Award, like literally on all the review outlets. It's just really good. It's just good. Oh, we also have the motherboards. You're right. X870E launched. It's actually a very good chips. Well, okay, it's not a brand new chipset. It's basically X670E with better wire memory traces for RAM. It also includes USB 4 now, which is equivalent and fully backwards compatible with Thunderbolt 4 and Thunderbolt 3. So if you have a Thunderbolt 3 device or a Thunderbolt 4 device, you can use those with an X870 and X870E motherboard. No problem. They work. They support PCIe tunneling. I've already done extensive testing with Thunderbolt peripherals, and they all work. Rest assured, I've tested 3 different motherboards. I've tested the Tomahawk, the Tai Chi, the the Asus Hero, the Crosshair Hero. All of them work flawlessly with Thunderbolt. So finally, we have platform parity between AMD and Intel. And then we had Z890 for Intel's Arrow Lake, which is actually a very good platform. Intel's new chipset is actually my favorite Intel chipset in like 10 years, if I'm being honest. Z790 was trash. Z690 was actually better in some objective ways, except for memory overclocking. But that assumed that you were on DDR5. So Intel was kind of boring for many, many generations. But Z890 is actually pretty good. They have parity with AMD now in the sense that both Intel and AMD give you a guaranteed Gen 5 SSD without any GPU lane sharing. Previously, with Z790, every single Z790 motherboard that offered a Gen 5 SSD slot was stealing lanes from the graphics card slot to pull that off. So that was the biggest drawback of using Z790. Thankfully, Z890 fixes this because Z890 gives us 4 more lanes of dedicated Gen 5 bandwidth for a total of 20 lanes. And that is all the difference in the world to improve the one major flaw that Z790 had. So now AMD and Intel are basically the same when it comes to the motherboards. You have USB 4 and Wi-Fi 7 on AMD. You have Thunderbolt 4 and Wi-Fi 7 on Intel. Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 are basically the same thing. So now you have the same thing. It's kind of like Thunderbolt is like the Intel hyper-threading name, and then USB 4 is the generic SMT term, you know what I'm saying, like the technical thing, the technical standard. So anyway, platform-wise they're the same, but they're great. And the funny thing is, with the 9800X3D launching at the end of this refresh cycle as the very last CPU of this year to come out, this one already has all the BIOS updates for X870 and X870E. So it is good to go. There is a brand new BIOS, however, that does give you the turbo X3D turbo mode. So do keep that in mind if you're someone who is going to be building a new 9800X3D system. You have the Nova and it's running great. What memory speed are you running on the Nova? Because a lot of people have been asking me if the Nova can do 8,000, and I can't answer them because I don't have the Nova. No BCLK, yeah. Yeah, the Tai Chi has BCLK. That's like the one major thing. You're paying $100 more for that external E-clock. It'll probably work on that, but my only reservation on A620 is a lot of those motherboards don't have proper cooling for the VRM. So just keep that in mind. And the 9950X is going to be the most power hungry chip out of all of them. It can pull 200 to 220 watts at full load, like while running Cinebench, for example. Oh, well, no, if they're rated for 64, don't even bother. Don't even bother. I've already tried to overclock 6400 RAM to 8. It doesn't work. The RAM sticks can't do it. It's just too much of an overclock. You're asking it to do essentially an 800 megahertz overclock, and it just can't do it. Okay, so we spent like almost 2.5 hours talking about the new 9800X3D. So let's shift focus here a little bit to the PlayStation 5 Pro. Because like I said at the beginning of the stream, I am going to be focusing on the PS5 Pro. At least initially, we're going to be deep diving into how the games look and play. Particularly the exclusives, because if it wasn't for the Sony exclusives, I wouldn't even have one of these consoles, to be honest. So really, it's going to come down to a few games. One of them is Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade on the PS5 Pro adds Pro and Pro Max graphic options. So one of them, Pro runs at 80 frames per second, I believe, up to 120 hertz if you have a 120 hertz display. And then Pro Max, I forget. This one is weird. This one runs at like 50 frames per second, which is like the old school PAL refresh hertz for old school like CRT and televisions in the European Union, which is, I don't understand why they did 50 hertz, but they did 50 FPS for the Pro Max, but it does run at 4K. So very interesting choices. I will be looking into that. I do need to finish Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is one of the best action games that came out earlier this year, back in, I believe it was April or May, and it is a PlayStation 5 exclusive. This game, if I had to compare it to other games, think of this as Nier Automata meets Lies of P. It's Nier Automata with Lies of P combined together via Fusion Dance or the Potara earrings. That is basically what this game is. So if you liked Lies of P and you like the parry mechanic, you're going to love Stellar Blade if you haven't played it yet. And if you liked that semi-open world slash stage-based exploration that you had in Nier Automata, although this is not as open world as Nier Automata. This one has like zones that you can explore, large open zones. It's kind of like Nier in that regard, but the combat is definitely more like it's kind of like a mix. It's like a mix between Nier and Lies of P, because it has the parry mechanic that Lies of P has. So it's very heavy on that, and if you don't like that, you're probably not going to enjoy this game that much. You can kind of get by playing it in easy mode. If you don't want to do the parry, the easy mode will give you an on-screen prompt of when to press the parry button. So there's that, if you just want to get through the story. But yeah, this is a game that I need to finish, so we will definitely be completing Stellar Blade on the PS5 Pro this month. I'm probably going to do it on stream, so we'll see. So stay tuned for that. And then the other big game, probably the Game of the Year contender, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is probably my personal Game of the Year for 2024. It's either going to come down to this game or Dragon's Dogma 2. I'm not 100%. I haven't really decided which one I like more. But that's mainly because I haven't finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm at the very end of the game. I think I have like 1.5 chapters left to do, and then we're completely done with this game. Although I still need, if I want to platinum the game, I still have to do a whole bunch of the Gilgamesh side quests and some of the other stuff. So, but yeah, this game, I can't wait to play this, because this one finally can run at 60 frames per second with good image quality. That is something that we could not do with the original PS5. So the patch basically fixes the image. the PSSR, everything is basically in use. You're getting the 60 frames per second. You're getting the PSSR upscale. So you're getting your DLSS style upscaling essentially. So yeah, this is probably game of the year. I can't really think of any other ones. People are saying Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2, no way, man. Like, that's a good game. It's a good live service game, but no. Game of the year? Really? No. So, yeah, I don't know what else is going to be up for grabs for Game of the Year, though. But this, Dragon's Dogma, maybe something like, I don't know, is Dragon Age really that good? A lot of people think Shadow of the Erdtree should be Game of the Year. As much as I like Shadow of the Erdtree, that is a DLC. I don't see how you make a DLC Game of the Year. Although the argument for Shadow of the Erdtree is it's so much content that it's worth a whole separate game by itself. So, but I don't know. I mean, Elden Ring already won Game of the Year 2 years ago. So it's like, do we really need to give it another Game of the Year? Even if it really is a good game? Like, it's a DLC. Come on. Like, really? Really? But anyway, there's a lot of people right now screaming and complaining and yelling at the top of their lungs that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is Game of the Year. But anyway, like, this is probably Game of the Year if Shadow of the Erdtree doesn't win. I don't know what else could be Game of the Year. But yeah, we're going to be playing this. We're going to be playing Stellar Blade. The other game that I'm going to be playing on the PS5 Pro is another game that I did not finish that was heavily overlooked after it came out. And that game is Rise of the Ronin. Rise of the Ronin is another PlayStation 5 exclusive game that came out back in March of this year, and it looked okay, but it did not run well, and it just, like, you could tell that it could benefit from either a really good AI upscaler like PSSR, for example, to fix a lot of the temporal instability that you could see in the noisiness of the image, because Team Ninja's game engine tends to have a lot of noisiness. It's like it could really benefit from a denoiser. So if you guys have played Neo and Neo 2, for example, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because Rise of the Ronin and Wolong Fallen Dynasty and Final Fantasy Origins Stranger of Paradise, it seems like Team Ninja has put out an action game literally every year for the last 4 years. 2020 was Neo 2 on PlayStation. Then we had, that was PS4 too. Then we had Neo 2 on PC in 2021. Then we had Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins in 2022 to compete with Elden Ring. Then we had Wolong Fallen Dynasty last year, and this year we have Rise of the Ronin. So, wow, man, Team Ninja is on a streak. Like, they've been cranking out action games. Although a lot of people are saying like the quality of their games are going down, because I feel like Neo 2 was peak. That was peak Team Ninja action. Then came Stranger Paradise, which was a collaboration with Square Enix, and I actually like Stranger Paradise. It was actually one of the more it was one of my most enjoyable games of 2022. However, Elden Ring was just so much better than it, and it launched in the same year as Elden Ring. So it was overshadowed because Elden Ring came out at the end of February. Stranger Paradise came out in March. It was like a few weeks after Elden Ring, so it completely got eclipsed and everybody forgot about it. Like, basically, Elden Ring came in like a meteor and like cratered the entire area, and all the games that launched around it, like Horizon Forbidden West, for example, and Final Fantasy Origins, obliterated. So, yeah, that's why no one talks about those games, even though those are really good games. But last year we had Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which had a whole bunch of like parry mechanics, and it was so over the top. It even had PvP, and the PvP was so unbalanced because of the parry mechanic. It was hilarious. People would just spam parry each other the whole time. It didn't look like anything was happening. But yeah, then Liza P came out and completely eclipsed Wolong. So yeah, man, Team Ninja has just not been doing good. I mean, they have good games, but it's like, then they launched Rise of the Ronin, and it's PS5 exclusive, and it didn't look or run that well on the base PS5. So that's another one that I'm gonna test out on the Pro, because I'm a big fan of action games. If you guys don't know, I'm a huge fan of the From Software games, the Devil May Cry series from Capcom, the Ninja Gaiden series from Team Ninja, hence the reason why I've been talking about Neo and all the more recent action games from these guys, and all those type of games. So definitely I need to play more of Rise of the Ronin, and what better way to do that than to play it on the new PS5 Pro. But yeah, those are probably the main three ones. We're also going to take a look at Lords of the Fallen, which is another action game. That was my favorite game of last year. And I'm going to see how that runs on the PS5 Pro. I already put like 100 hours into that game on the PC last year. So we'll play through some of that, at least a little bit of that on the PS5 Pro, just to see how the PS5 Pro handles a UE5 game. Because that is a UE5 game that was insanely hard to run when it came out last year. It had a whole bunch of patches. It had like 3 months worth of patches to get it into a much better state. But despite all that, I still had a blast playing that game. Alright, so I guess final story here. Or actually, hold on. Is there one more that I wanted to say on this? Oh, yeah. One more thing I want to say about PS5 Pro. The First Descendant is the first PS5 Pro game to combine PSSR with AMD FSR frame generation. So everybody loves upscaling, especially AI upscaling like DLSS. And now everybody loves frame gen. So now this game is proving that the PS5 Pro can do FSR frame gen, and combined that with AI upscaling, aka PSSR. So I think if this game is free to play, I will definitely check it out just to see how the new console handles AI-based upscaling with frame gen. Because the industry is totally moving in this direction. If you guys saw my streams from the last weekend, we went super in-depth with Monster Hunter Wilds, and Monster Hunter Wilds is a game just like Final Fantasy 16 on PC that was designed to leverage frame gen. The developers actually want you to turn frame gen on. They literally say that in the patch notes. And if you listen to the developer interviews, they literally say it in the interviews that frame gen is a technology that we have embraced fully, and we plan to implement it in future titles with the goal of leveraging frame generation to deliver better gaming experiences for our fans and the people who play our game. This is what they plan to do. So as much as people hate it or love it, it's here to stay, and it's going to become a industry standard going forward, at least with larger and mid-sized developers. And I don't know about like indie developers, but it's not going away, people. And this is the sign of the times with the first PS5 Pro game to combine PSSR with FrameGen. So FrameGen I like to see this. FrameGen on console means that potentially we could see like games that double from 60 FPS mode to like 120 FPS on console. So again, it also depends on the latency, because I understand the argument against FrameGen is the increased latency. But if the frame rate is high enough to begin with, if the base frame rate is high, then it, from my personal experience, is really not that bad. It depends on the type of game you're playing, but if you're playing a single-player game, it's not really going to affect anything. So, and I think that's why a lot of these developers are starting to embrace FrameGen as an actual thing that they're going to utilize as an expected thing that you're supposed to make use of. So, like, it's one of those things where it's like, if you aren't using FrameGen, you're doing it wrong, I guess, at least in the developer's eyes. So, Yeah, it seems like this game, it says right here. So this is what this developer said. Here's what the engine programmer said. The most impressive aspect during the PS5 Pro adaptation process was the AI-driven upscaling technology known as PSSR. On the existing base model, the FSR image upscaling feature is typically used, which has some drawbacks, such as pixel ghosting. We saw that with the frame gen on Monster Hunter, and pixel jittering during the pixel reconstruction process. The PS5 Pro's image upscaling based on PSSR minimizes these weaknesses and delivers highly impressive results. The original PS5 base model offered FSR upscaling and FSR frame gen features. On the PS5 Pro, we provide an option that combines PSSR with FSR frame gen, allowing for higher resolution, higher frame rate experience compared to before. So that is actually really good to see, because this means that developers are starting to improve their skill set, because I feel like there was a whole bunch of stagnation until now when it came to how developers get better mileage out of the hardware using software-based techniques. And this is kind of the initiative that both AMD and Intel want developers to do. They want developers to leverage these technologies, because it's getting harder and harder for us to rely on hardware to brute force a problem in, for example, 4K gaming, and just make the problem go away with better hardware. So that is the signs of the times, unfortunately, depending on what your opinion is on that, like utilizing software better to get better performance versus just relying on hardware-based solutions. But that is the future. So frame gen and upscaling is where we're headed, industry-wide. Was that the last thing? Okay, before I go on to the Intel story, one more, and then there's one more story after this. AMD Ryzen 9 9950X3D 16-core CPU spotted and tested. Okay, this number is too high. I don't know how believable this is. Up to 64% faster than the 7950X3D. What? Oh, Factorio? Wait a minute. The Factorio is way higher than the 9800X3D. Yeah, I don't know what this means. What does it say? Clock speeds and TDPs are unknown. Given that we have seen what we have seen on the 9800X3D, the 9950X3D might also take advantage of the second generation 3D Vcache stack. Well, obviously it will. It's not that it might. It will, and allow for higher speeds than the 7950X3D while offering a TDP of 120 to 170. Yeah, I expect this one to use 170. The CPU should also feature full overclocking support besides the standard PBO. Okay. So the performance of this was tested in Factorio. For comparison, this is okay, so this improvement is 64% over that, and an 18% improvement over the 9800X3D. Okay. Yeah, this CPU is probably going to be like $650 to $700. Probably $700 at launch, if I'm going to guess. So if you're someone who wants to wait for this, if you don't like the idea of spending $700 or $699 on a CPU, don't wait for this and get the 9800X3D. If you really want the most multi-thread performance possible with the best gaming performance possible, aka the best of both worlds, as AMD always says, then you're going to be waiting for this. But this is going to be a $700 CPU when it comes out. If it's this much better, it's minimum price of this, the minimum at launch will be $649. Otherwise, this will definitely be $699, because that is the price of Intel's KS. So the Intel Core Ultra, assuming they even do a KS, the next year Intel will launch the Core Ultra 285KS for $729. So if Intel's going to launch $730 CPU, AMD can easily charge $700 for this. And the reality is this thing is going to completely blow the Intel KS out of the water. It's just basically going to evaporate into the air. Because I don't even know what Intel is going to do, man. Like, Intel literally is dead in the water. Like, what? Intel's having to compete with last generation Raptor Lake parts. They can't even beat their previous generation. They're losing to themselves. Meanwhile, AMD just walked in front of them with the 9800X3D and just completely ignored them. It was like, Intel was like, wow, yeah, it was so efficient. Yeah, man, wow, it's at parity with Raptor Lake in the gaming. It's at parity with Zen 5 in the gaming. It's so good. It's so energy efficient, man. Look at that efficiency, man. That's some good stuff right there. It's got some AV1 and code. It's got really good multi-thread. It's got brand new chipset. Very good stuff. Meanwhile, AMD just like walks in, mic drop, everybody gets quiet, and that's it. And then they just walk out, and that's it. You know, it just silences the whole room. All this, is a 16-core CPU, is it an 8-core CPU, multi-thread? Yeah, nobody cares, man. Like no one cares about the multi-thread anymore, considering that the GPU does all the acceleration in a lot of these apps anyway. So, the computer platform will have the bottleneck. Are you talking about Z890? Z890. See, here is the irony of Intel's dilemma. Z890 is so much better than Z790. Z790 is such a trash chipset, and it's paired up with monolithic Raptor Lake. Literally a mini nuclear reactor, aka the 14900KS. So this is their fastest CPU. It's a year old, almost. I mean, if we're talking KS. But it's a mini nuclear reactor, and it has a terrible chipset. Meanwhile, Arrow Lake, great chipset. It's so much better. The motherboard is so much better than the old Intel motherboard. Unfortunately, the CPU is a waste of sand. In some people would call it a waste of sand. I'm gonna tell it like it is. Almost a waste of sand. It's cool. It has some gimmicks. The gimmick is that you have to count the P cores and the E cores in a specific order because they're not all in a row. Like with Raptor Lake, it was 8 P cores and 16 E cores. It was like that. You know what I'm saying? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Do we need to clean this up? We got all this stuff on the board. Hold on, let's clean up this stuff real quick. We have to do some paint. We have to dedicate some paint to all those Intel CPUs out there that are sitting on store shelves and in warehouses, struggling to be sold right now. Okay. So, how do I want to do this? Intel's monolithic Raptor Lake has, I'm trying to think how this goes. P, 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 E, 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 E. Is that right? 4, 8, 12. Yeah. So you have P, 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 E, 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 E. That is 14900KS. That's how you count them. If you do it now, if we're talking about the Intel Core Ultra, they are not like that. You cannot name them like that. The Intel Core Ultra is hold on. Yeah, PP E E E E. Is that right? Oh no, it's not. It's wrong. See, even I don't even know this. Okay, no, make them larger. P E E E E P E E. Wait, hold on. 2, 4, 6, 8. Wait, hold up. Something's wrong. Oh, I'm missing. Okay, hold on. P E E E E E E E no. P E E E E P. This is the Core Ultra. So P E E E E E E E P. That is the Core Ultra 9 285K. That is it. So you have 2 P cores, 8 E cores, 4 P cores, 8 more E cores, and 2 P cores. That is the Intel Core Ultra. So everybody can count it with me now. P P E E E E E E E E P P P P E E E E E E E P P. That is completely different from the traditional Raptor Lake and the Alder Lake. Does that make sense? So they did do something cool. They got rid of hyperthreading. You can't even turn it on, even if you wanted to. It's completely gone. And they moved the P cores and the E cores. They interleaved them. They put 2 P cores at the top, 2 P cores at the bottom, 4 P cores in the middle. And then they put 8 P cores here and 8 P cores here. So Intel did actually make some physical rearrangements to the compute tile. If that makes sense. Why are we talking about this? I have no idea. But this is probably one of the most interesting, if not entertaining, things about the new Intel CPU. So now that we've gone through the exercise, everybody is capable of having memorized the order of the P and E cores on an Intel Core Ultra. Now, what about a Core 7? The Core Ultra 7 disables 4 E cores. These are not here. These 4 are disabled. So you have P P E E E E P P P P E E E E E E E E P P. So it's easier to count. But that is the main difference. And then if we're talking, if we're going to talk about the Core Ultra 5, they disable 2 of the P cores in the middle and then an additional 4 E cores. So on a Core Ultra 5, it's literally just P P E E E E P P E E E E P P. So that one's actually the easiest one to remember and recite the poetry out loud. And man, all that singing really dries out my throat. That's tiring, man. You try singing that Intel song, you're gonna need some water. So do you think X870E Tai Chi is the best choice if I plan to overclock the CPU later? There's no best choice. The best choice... Well, okay, if you're talking overclocking, you're going to want to choose one of the highest... Like, you're going to choose one of the flagship boards. So you're going to be choosing flagship. What are the flagship boards? We already went over them. X870E Tai Chi. The X870E Aorus Master. The, I guess the Extreme. Hold on. The X870E Carbon Wi-Fi, or Carbon, I guess? Carbon Wi-Fi. And the... Hold on, where is it? X870 Hero. Or Strix. Yeah, where's the Strix? X870E Strix. Oh yeah, I forgot to switch it over. So these are the boards. So the Strix E-E, or I guess the Dash E from Asus. This one would be good. The ARC Tai Chi would also be good. This is $50 cheaper than that board. The Carbon from MSI is also a good choice. This and the Strix are the same amount of money. They're both $500. Where the Tai Chi comes in $50 cheaper. But remember, the Tai Chi is an EATX motherboard. It is wider. It is physically wider than these other boards. So if you're going to get this, you're going to need a case that can fit EATX. And then from Gigabyte, there is the Aorus Master, which I don't know why Gigabyte's website, it never scales properly when I zoom in. But yeah, the Aorus Master, the Aorus Extreme AI Top, if you're going for the best of the best from Gigabyte, the AI Top. So let's go to the gallery on each of these. So, yeah, AI Top. This one, so, Pro, I don't recommend ProArt. And the reason why I don't recommend the ProArt, it does not have the postcode debug. If you're someone who wants to do overclocking, you want a motherboard that has a postcode debug. Do not buy a motherboard that does not have this. You will regret it if you want to do overclocking. So for that reason alone, I do not recommend the ProArt. The ProArt also is... It's like a little bit more expensive than the Tai Chi. I think it's like $480. And it doesn't include, as far as I know, it does not include the asynchronous E-clock, where this does have that. And the Strix from Asus also has that. So if you want an Asus board for overclocking, I recommend the Dash E. The Strix E-E at $500 will get the job done. The ProArt is a scam unless you're someone who just wants to build like a productivity PC, and you wouldn't put a 9800X3D in a ProArt. You would pair that up with a 9900X or a 9950X for productivity. That is what the ProArt is for. It's not for overclocking. It's very expensive, and it's not for overclocking, so I do not recommend it. The Carbon is decent. It's another $500 board. It has the postcode. It has all the things. I assume it has asynchronous E-clock, but I'm not 100% sure on that. If somebody out there has this board, if they can confirm whether or not that it has that feature, that would be really nice. The Aorus Master, I assume that it has the external E-clock, also known as base clock, asynchronous mode, because the X670E does have it. So I assume the X870E would also have it. But for sure, the AI Top would definitely have the the external E-clock. Now, the one thing I want to also look at, you also want to check the back. You want to see how many Type A ports the board's going to have, how many USB-C. In this case, all of them will have at least dual USB 4 40 gig ports that also support display port alt mode, so you can literally drive a monitor off of this USB port, off of the integrated graphics. This one has dual 10 gig. Not a lot of people need even one 10 gig. So this is dual. This is like super overkill. It also has the BIOS flashback button on the back, which is very, very good. The clear CMOS is also very, very good if you're going to be doing overclocking. So this is an example of a good rear I/O. If we look at the master has basically the same. I mean, it has a 5 gig LAN. It's got a lot of USB Type A. If we look at the Tai Chi, yeah, lots of USB Type A, USB 4. So all that good stuff is there. 5 gig LAN. The Carbon has an insanely nice I/O, lots of USB-A, lots of USB-C, dual LAN, 5 gig and 2.5 gig. So it's got 4 USB-C. It's got dual USB 4 with DisplayPort Alt, and then it's got dual 10 gig USB-C. So that's a good one. It even has a smart button. So yeah, the MSI Carbon one actually looks really good. For the flagship board, well, okay, we did look at the AI Top. The AI Top is going to be like the equivalent to the Hero. Only this is like the Gigabyte Hero. If you're looking at the Asus Hero, you know, this one, it's going to have stuff that most people are not actually going to ever use. Like, for example, Slim SAS. I did a video on how to actually use Slim SAS to avoid GPU lane sharing. So I'm currently using this motherboard to live stream right now. And I'm using 4 SSDs, 2 SATA drive, well, 4 SATA. I've got 4 SATA and 4 M.2, and I have no GPU lane sharing using it this way. And I also have a 4K 60 Thunderbolt capture card, an AverMedia Thunderbolt card connected for the PlayStation 5 Pro. So fully integrated setup. So everything is working according as it should. We're running the RAM currently at 6400, although I will eventually switch over to the 9800 X3D, and then we are going to be running RAM at 8000 again. And then, so these are the ones that I'd recommend. So the Strix, the Carbon, let's go back to the picture here. The Carbon, the Tai Chi, and the Master. These are the ones that I recommend. What about the Nova? Well, the question was asking about overclocking. Wasn't that the question? The original question. I gotta go find the question. The chat has already like overwritten it. What was the question? My story? I don't even know what the story was. The story makes your stomach hurt from laughing? What was the story? Oh, the song? The Intel song? So do you think X870E Tai Chi is the best choice? Oh, yeah, that was the question. Do you think the X870E Tai Chi is the best choice if you plan to overclock the CPU? If you plan to overclock the CPU, you can do that with any of the motherboards. You don't need these $500 motherboards. If you want external E-clock, also known as base clock asynchronous mode, if you want that feature, because that is a expensive feature that is only relevant to extreme overclockers. If you want to have access to all the overclocking tools, these are the motherboards that I recommend. The Strix, the Carbon, the Tai Chi, and the Master. If you don't care about money and you just want to buy like the most expensive high-end motherboard, as Susar is saying, get the Godlike. The Godlike is the best. X870E Godlike. If you can actually find this motherboard. This motherboard is insanely good. It is godlike. But it is stupid expensive. It has all the screens. It's got like 3 screens. It's got everything that you'll ever need, even the things that you don't even know that you need. It is EATX, so you'll need a very big case. This is not going to work in small form factor. The Godlike is full of gimmicks. If you like gimmicks on the motherboard, like a detachable screen and fully integrated like RGB headers and all kinds of stuff, you know, a really clean design. You don't see any connectors. They're all on the side or they're up here hidden away. You know, this is a super high-end board. I need to watch the MSI Insider live stream to learn more about this, because I think they're doing a live stream on this board at some point soon. But yeah, this board is stupid expensive. It is broken in terms of features. It has so many features. It has 10 gig LAN and 5 gig LAN, because why not? It has a whole bunch, 2, 4, 6, 8 USB Type A. All of them are 10 gig. Then you have a whole bunch of USB-C 10 gig. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 USB-C 10 gig. Then you have dual 40 gig USB-C that support monitors. So you can still drive external monitors off of these dual USB 4 ports. So there's that. I'm using the integrated graphics. So yeah, this is the fully loaded. This is the Mercedes S-Class motherboard. Like, this is not for the regular, like, this is not me. Like, I mean, it's cool, it's nice, it's something to look at and marvel at like Computex or CES or some PAX East or West or whatever. But honestly, like, this is like so out of reach. It's just so over the top. It's so over the top. Like, how many people are actually going to leverage all the features that this motherboard offers? I mean, I probably won't. Like, I won't. I mean, maybe. I can force myself to use all the features. So there's this. I mean, the highest end Gigabyte's flagship is the Extreme AI Top. The AI Top has an RGB. It has literally an RGB Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth antenna. It has RGB on the Wi-Fi 7 antenna. That is how overkill it is on these extreme gimmick-ridden motherboards. Dual 10 gig LAN. Dual 10 gig LAN. Who needs dual 10 gig LAN? Very few people out there actually benefit from 10 gig LAN. But dual 10 gig LAN? Dual 10 gig LAN? Really? On a consumer motherboard? Extreme AI Top. It has the big old screen here on the left. So we have this. Yeah, the Godlike. I mean, these things are the most gimmick-ridden, super high-end Mercedes S-Class motherboards that the regular gamers are not really going to ever purchase these. People are going to try to win this through like a sweepstakes giveaway or something from MSI. Or some like raffle at an event somewhere at like PAX or Computex or something like that. That's typically how people get these type of motherboards. They also don't manufacture that many of these. You know what I mean? Like, this is the MSI is probably only gonna make like maybe 3,000 of these top for the entire world. So I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think they're gonna manufacture a lot of these. Because these are the only reason why these motherboards exist. These motherboards are basically there to act as halo products to attract a PC enthusiast to look at the brand. They're not gonna buy this, but it's like, oh, you have a $1,000 plus motherboard. Ooh, that must mean you're good quality. That must mean you make good stuff. So I want to go look at what you got. Okay, you got this thing. It's got all the bells and whistles that I don't actually need. It's cool. It makes you pay attention to MSI. It makes me, it psychologically conditions me to believe that MSI is a competent company that makes good quality things. Therefore, I'm going to look at what they've got. Oh, I can't afford this thing. Okay, well, let's see what they got. Oh yeah, this thing. Yeah, this is good, man. This makes a lot of sense. I think I'll get this. Oh, so they buy the Carbon. So by enticing somebody with a $1,300 motherboard, you look at a $1,300 motherboard and then you look at a $500 motherboard and you're like, oh, this one's only $500. That's so much more reasonable than $1,300. I guess I'll buy this one because it makes a lot more sense. Assuming $500 is an acceptable price for a motherboard. That is why these sort of things exist. They exist to basically give off an aura of we as a brand are high quality. We make godlike electronics. You must pay attention to us. You don't have to buy the godlike, but now that you've seen it, why don't you look at what we've got that might work for you? And hence someone ends up buying a Carbon. That's how it works. Same thing with the Asus. Now Asus, they haven't launched their Extreme for X870, but if you guys remember, they have a, whoa, these are stories that we haven't even talked about. Hold on, let's skip this one. Let's do X670E Crosshair Extreme. So Asus does have an Extreme. This one. They don't have an X870E, but they do have the X670 one. If you guys remember this one. This is a $1,000 flagship from Asus. And notice it's EATX. Notice how all the really big, like super Halo tier motherboards are all big and powerful and wide and take up a lot of space and are very impractical. You know, notice the Godlike is huge, huge board. And then you have the Extreme from Asus, big motherboard, big heat sinks, wide motherboard, right angled on everything. So you have this style. Then you have the AI top, big, wide EATX, extra heavy. You already have a 30-pound case. Well, here's another, like, what is this? Like 8-9 pounds of motherboard, maybe 10 pounds of motherboard if we're talking like the Extreme or something. So, you know, they have their stuff. The ASRock doesn't always do. I think ASRock had what, like what was the ASRock one last gen? It was like X670E, ASRock, what was it called? Aqua or something? Did they do an Aqua? I don't even remember. I guess they did actually. Oh, they did the Carrera. But the Carrera was like a $550. So ASRock was the only one that didn't have like some broken, crazy, hey, look at us, we have good stuff. You know, like ASRock was the only one that didn't do that. They did this marble white thing. Like that's what they did. They went with the marble, like stone-looking heat sinks. Yeah, they did a X570 Aqua. Yeah, but the point is, you know, like how many people are actually going to benefit from these things? Like, really? Like, I don't know. I mean, they're cool. Don't get me wrong. They're really, really cool. But like, would you actually buy one of these things? I don't know. Like, it depends on the use case because there are some rare scenarios where these make sense. But realistically, if someone was really, really considering that kind of money on a motherboard, like for a Godlike or something, I would recommend they get a Threadripper. Like, I would recommend they get TRX 50 Aero D or something. Like, they should get this. They should go with Threadripper and get this. This is a $600 motherboard from Gigabyte that supports Threadripper. So, like, and this has, you know, USB 4, all that good stuff, Wi-Fi 7, etc. And yes, it's EATX, but it's not like brokenly huge and heavy like those $1,000 things. And this is $600 compared to like $1,300 for a Godlike. But this gets you into the Threadripper ecosystem, provided you can spend money on a Threadripper CPU and RDIMM memory. But that's besides the point. Like, really, if someone was seriously considering this, I would recommend them at least look at the Threadripper platform at that point. Slap on 4X Gen 5 SSD, 4TB as well. Yeah, but you can do that on the other ones. You can do that on this. You know? Like you can do the 4 M.2s on these other boards. Like you can do 4 M.2s on the Taichi and it still doesn't do any GPU lane sharing. So it's like, you know. So if someone's really thinking of like $1,000 or more for a motherboard, I would strongly question them on what is the actual goal here. Like, what are you trying to build? Because that much money on a motherboard for a gaming CPU, for a gaming desktop, doesn't really make a lot of sense. But anyway, that's what I recommend. Let's just jump into these final stories here. So AMD Ryzen 7 9800X 3D CPU achieves over 1,000 FPS in Counter-Strike 2, over 2,000 FPS in Valorant, with a 6.9 gigahertz overclock at just 100 watts. Okay, this CPU is already starting to set like insane records. Doing stuff like this. Wait, that's actually usable? Like it's actually you can play Valorant stable at 6.9. Obviously, it's on some kind of phase change or LN2 or something or dry ice to be able to do that, but that's insane that is actually possible. Let me see, what were they doing here? Why are there so many? Why is there like 2 instances of the same CPU Z? These guys need to upgrade to the latest version of CPU Z. This is still showing the wrong Ryzen logo. If you guys have a Zen 5 CPU, like the 9800X3D, and if you're on the latest version of CPU Z, the icon will not look like that. Or I guess the logo. Let me see if I have the latest one on here. This is version 2.10. I'm on version, yeah, this one. This is how it's supposed to look. So it's supposed to look like this. See. This is a 9950X. So this is the CPU that we're streaming on right now. But the new logo, AMD has a new logo for Zen 5. They're taking this logo from, or I guess the sticker design, from the new mobile parts. So if you're on Zen 4, aka 7800X3D, you're going to have the older logo, the one that's shown in this screenshot here. But if you're on Zen 5, you're going to have the new Ryzen logo. They're actually moving away from the old circular, like the ENSO sign symbol that they had for all those years. So they're actually going to like just, you know, AMD Ryzen now instead of the circle. But anyway, so that's interesting. In other news, Intel is going to unveil the next-gen ARC Battlemage desktop GPUs next month. Apparently, they're doing this next month. Expected to offer brilliant performance. Yes, brilliant performance. Intel expected to reveal decisive information around ARC Battlemage desktop GPUs next month, setting the tone for next-gen GPU markets. All right, so they're really going to do this. It's about time. It's literally like 4 months late, but they missed their window. Well, they still have a window, though. If they can get it out on the holiday, if they can get it out in December, kind of like how AMD launched RDNA 3 in December 2 years ago. They have a chance. So this is going to be good. If you're somebody looking for a brand new GPU to pair up with a 9800 X3D for some really good 1080p and maybe 1440p gaming, this new Intel Battlemage GPU is probably going to be a good choice. This will give you around an RTX 4070 performance level. If all the leaks are true, and if all, well, not even the leaks, I'm just speaking like from my own expectation. Like, I expect this GPU, the Intel's fastest Battlemage, will be neck and neck with the RTX 4070 and AMD's. It'll be somewhere between an RX 7700 XT and a 7800 XT, which means this thing is basically a desktop equivalent of the PlayStation 5 Pro, although this will have a higher power limit than the PS5 Pro, which means this can outperform, potentially this can outperform a PS5 Pro. So, yeah, if you want to game at 1080p and maybe some 1440p, this could be a good choice. So, but we'll see what happens next month. They really need to launch this thing next month. If Intel wants to have a chance at being relevant this GPU cycle, they need to launch next month, and they need to launch with an Intel reference card, like this limited edition, for example. If they only launch with board partners and they miss the window, the holiday window, they basically like miss the entire cycle, because otherwise, all the news is going to focus on NVIDIA and AMD next year, and Intel will get drowned out by the rising tide of the 50 series inbound and the RDNA 4 swimming toward the shoreline. Meanwhile, Intel's just standing there on the beach, like hiding in a sandcastle or something. You know what I'm saying? So it's just not a good look. So they really need to get this thing out the door ASAP. Because all they gotta do is basically like, hey guys, I know you just got this 9800 X3D, so it's like, why don't you pair it up with the new Intel Battlemage? Because everybody knows that the best gaming PC consists of an AMD CPU and an Intel GPU. Like, newsflash, everybody should know that, right? Like, that's basically the messaging that they need to do. But I don't think they're going to do that. They're going to be like, hey, why don't you pair up Battlemage with Intel Core Ultra? It's ultra gaming. Yeah. That's probably what they're going to do. They're going to shoot themselves in the foot. I'm just saying, like, they're going to do something dumb like that. Clearly, they should ride the coattails of the 9800 X3D if they want to sell GPUs. Because if they try to, like, pair it up with one of these, and they're like, hey, guys, check it out. So they're just going to bottleneck their GPU like crazy. It's just going to look so dumb. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and the messaging can be like, everybody knows that XESS is, like, more better, or whatever. So it's like, that's what they need to do, man. They just need to do a marketing campaign like that. Just make a bunch of TikTok meme videos. That's all they gotta do, and they're just gonna sell, like, literally boatloads of Battlemage GPUs on the back of a 9800 X3D CPU wave. You know, like, that's all they gotta do. It's easy. They just gotta learn how to surf. They gotta surf the waves of success. Sometimes they gotta, like, ride the coattails of their competitor, man. Like, that's all they gotta do. Like, don't be dumb. Don't try to, like, show how it looks with Intel Core Ultra, because that's literally how you shoot yourself in the foot and you fail hard. Like, just show this. Show it with 9800 X3D. Eliminate the CPU bottleneck. And show how good it is against a 3070 or something, and then I guess people will get hyped up about it. That's all they gotta do. ARC can use FSR. Yeah, just whatever, you know, like FSR, yeah. Frame gen. Yeah, just frame gen. FSR frame gen is good, yeah. It's good, man. Like, that's all they gotta do. I'm telling you, that's the truth. Like, they do that, they succeed. If they do what I said not to do, they'll fail. Alright, so, the last thing... Okay, the very last thing here, the last story I've got... Wait, did we do this one? Yeah, we already did this one. So, the very last one... AMD achieved record server revenue in Q3 of 2024. Desktop now amounts to 28.7% unit share, and mobile gaining too. Yeah, actually, I read recently that one of those, I guess it's one of those firms that looks at like market share in the server, in the data center world, has said that AMD actually overtook Intel in units sold for a server. I mean, I can understand that. The market share, Intel's still the leader in market share, but that's because all the old servers in the market are still on Intel. You know, it's just like the same thing in the consumer market, where the vast majority of people playing games on a PC are still on what I call a pandemic PC. They're on a PC with either AM4, typically either a Ryzen 3000 or Ryzen 5000, or they're on an Intel 10th gen, or Intel 9th gen, or maybe Intel 11th gen, but there's not a whole lot of people on those. So realistically, like Intel 10th gen or AMD Ryzen 5000, like those are what I call pandemic PCs, because those PCs are like 4 years old. They came out back in 2020. That's when they were new. Hence why they're pandemic PCs. So most people are on that. Same thing in the data center world. A lot of servers today are still running like older Intel Xeons, but a lot of these are getting refreshed to AMD EPYC-based systems. So, and Intel's obviously, you know, they're selling like Emerald Rapids and Sapphire Rapids. Sapphire Rapids was not really popular at all, though, and that's kind of what hurt Intel's market share compared to AMD. Now AMD has the Turin series now in desktop, or not desktop, in server, which is basically using Zen 5 and Zen 5C in the server world. So it's just going to get even worse. Realistically, Intel needs to choose. I personally think Intel needs to choose between either go all in on P cores or go all in on E cores, and stop with this ridiculous PPEEEE, PPEE, PPPP. Like, get rid of that stuff and just go with like one or the other, and quit doing both, because it's just making things too confusing for themselves, especially for their customers in the data center. So it's like they're kind of doing that, but they're still selling like one CPU that's all P cores and one CPU that's all E cores. That's actually the right thing to do. I just don't want to see them put both cores on the same chip anymore. Like, that's dumb. It doesn't really work. So, especially in the data center where you want everything to be uniform and symmetrical in terms of the type of cores. So, yeah. They kind of messed themselves up quite a few times. But, yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it. There was another article that I read somewhere that said that the U.S. government is going to force Intel and AMD to combine or merge. That sounds almost like some kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy thing to me, but I don't really see that happening. That sounds really retarded, but the article suggested that Intel and AMD need to merge, or somebody like Marvell or something needs to acquire Intel and get rid of the Intel and just go and become something else. But I don't see that happening. I really think that a lot of people complaining about Intel being, oh, woe is me, such as Intel, their life is so hard. Like, I don't think it's that bad. Realistically, it's not that bad. Now, if things continue to trend in the way they've been going for the last 2 years, then yeah, then things are going to start going all panic mode at Intel pretty soon over the course of next year, if they can't figure out how to steer the ship around, or if someone doesn't come in and buy them. Like, literally acquire the whole company. Charles, thanks for the sub. But yeah, something needs to change because we got this. You know, like, that's what we got. We waited 2 years, and this was the result of 2 years of waiting. You know, like, really? This is it. This is it. Negative 5% in gaming after 2 years. Yeah, it's lower power. It's still more power than AMD, but it's lower power than, you know, the 2-year-old part. I don't know. Good motherboards, though. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this stream. I think I wanted to do some PC part picker stuff. We'll probably do that, like, next week. I just wanted to get through all the content on 9800X3D, what to know if you're picking up the platform, you're getting into a DDR5 based system, what to look out for. We will be doing a live stream build featuring the 9800X3D tomorrow with a case, so an NZXT case, some 8000 DDR5 and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. If you like those type of build videos, I guess, or build live streams, I don't know what you call them, but I'll be doing that. Yes, we will be overclocking the 9800X3D in separate content on the channel in future videos. So I guess because of what the viewers have asked me to do, like last week, I asked people what motherboard they want to see me build the 9800X3D in, and the choices were the Hero, the Tai Chi, and the Steel Legend and the Tomahawk. And everybody said Tai Chi. I don't think anybody mentioned any of the other motherboards. So it's going to be the Tai Chi, and that's what we're going to work with. So yeah, expect to see other live streams on the weekend, particularly for PS5 Pro. We have PS5 Pro content for all those console gamers out there that also game on PC, because believe it or not, you can game on multiple platforms. I game on PlayStation, I game on PC, I get the best of both worlds, I have it all integrated into one system. So we'll go through that this weekend. So expect videos on the channel for PS5 Pro. There's going to be a live stream build for 9800X3D, and there's going to be some content for the CPU in the future. So anyway, that's going to be it for this week's episode of Tech Thursdays. And if you're new to the channel, do get subscribed. If you do like this content, we do these live streams every Thursdays around this time. Yeah, we go for about 3 hours typically. This week we went over. But that's basically going to be it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care, and I'll see you then. Thanks.